When a billionaire collapses in the rain, screaming in agony but refusing help, a stranger has seconds to break through her terror or watch her die. Victoria Hale built an empire on control. But tonight, outside the city's most exclusive restaurant, she's lost it all. The pain is blinding, the ambulance is coming, and she won't get in. Ethan Cole knows what happens when fear wins. He buried his wife because of it. Now he has one chance to save a woman who'd rather die than face her darkest memory. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that night, the kind that turned the streets into rivers and made the neon signs above the restaurants bleed their colors across the pavement. It was the sort of weather that kept most people inside, huddled in their apartments with Netflix and takeout. But not the kind of people who ate at Marchese's. Marchese's didn't take reservations from just anyone. You needed the right last name, the right connections, or the right number of zeros in your bank account. The valets wore nicer suits than most CEOs. The wine list had bottles that cost more than a used car. And on any given Friday night, you could spot at least 3 faces you'd recognize from the business section of the Times. Victoria Hale had eaten there 47 times. She kept count. She kept count of everything. Tonight was supposed to be number 48, a celebration dinner with her development team. They'd just closed the Riverside project, $800 million, 18 months ahead of schedule. She'd ordered the Chilean sea bass. She'd allowed herself a second glass of Bordeaux. She'd even laughed at Martin's terrible joke about the zoning committee. Then the pain started. At first, it was just a twinge, something she could ignore. Victoria Hale had built a $2 billion real estate empire by ignoring discomfort. You didn't get where she was by taking sick days or admitting weakness. Ms. Hale? Martin had leaned forward, his face creasing with concern. Are you all right? Fine. She'd waved him off, reaching for her water glass. Her hand shook slightly. She noticed. She made it stop. Continue. But Martin had paused mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on her face. The rest of the table had gone quiet. In that silence, Victoria became aware of the sweat beading at her temples, the way her breath had gone shallow. I think we should... Someone started. I said, I'm fine. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Let's finish this conversation. The Morgan property won't wait for... The pain hit her like a freight train. It started somewhere deep in her abdomen and radiated outward, a white-hot spike that drove the air from her lungs and turned her vision into a tunnel. She heard herself make a sound. Not a scream, not yet, but something close. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the table. Jesus, call an ambulance. Ms. Hale, stay with us. The voices came at her from all directions. Hands reached for her. She tried to stand, to push them away, to maintain some fragment of control. Instead, her knees buckled. She felt Martin catch her under the arms, heard the crash of glassware as someone knocked over a wine bottle. Get her outside, give her air. No, keep her still. Has anyone called 911? They half-carried, half-dragged her through the restaurant. Victoria was dimly aware of the other diners turning to stare, their expensive meals forgotten. The maitre d' was shouting something about clearing a path. Her heel caught on the carpet and snapped off. She didn't care. The pain was everything now, a living thing with claws that dug deeper with each breath. The rain hit her face like a slap. They'd gotten her outside, onto the covered entrance where town cars and Teslas queued up for valet service. Someone had draped a jacket over her shoulders. Martin was on his phone, barking at the 911 dispatcher. The rest of her team hovered around her like worried birds, useless and well-meaning. Ambulance is 3 minutes out, Martin said, crouching beside her. Victoria, can you hear me? They're coming. That word cut through the fog of pain like a knife. Ambulance, hospital, no, no. She grabbed Martin's wrist, her nails digging into his skin. No hospital. What? Victoria, you need... I said no. The words came out as a growl. She tried to sit up, to stand, to do anything that would prove she didn't need their help. The movement sent another wave of agony through her core, and she gasped, doubling over. Ms. Hale, you're not thinking clearly. Don't tell me what I'm... She couldn't finish the sentence. The pain stole her words, left her panting and shaking. She's in shock, someone said. A woman's voice. Kimberly from accounting, maybe. We need to keep her warm. More jackets appeared. Someone was rubbing her back. Martin was still on the phone, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The rain drummed on the awning above them, turning the street into a blur of headlights and brake lights. Victoria closed her eyes and saw her mother's face, pale, waxen, breathing through a tube while machines beeped their electronic dirges. 7 years old, sitting in that plastic chair that was too big for her, watching her mother disappear by increments. The smell of disinfectant, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the way her mother's hand had gone cold in hers, degree by degree, until there was no warmth left at all. They'd said it was supposed to be routine, a simple surgery, nothing to worry about. Victoria had worried anyway. She'd worried while they wheeled her mother away. She'd worried through the endless hours in the waiting room. She'd worried when the doctor came out, his face grave, his words careful and measured and completely inadequate. Complication. Infection. Everything we could. Victoria had stopped worrying after that. She'd stopped feeling much of anything. She'd learned that hospitals were places where mothers went to die, where white coats and kind voices couldn't save you, where all the money in the world meant nothing. She'd built her empire on that lesson. Control what you can, trust no one, and never ever let them take you to a hospital. No, she said again, but her voice was barely a whisper now. Please, no hospital. The ambulance is here, someone shouted. Victoria's eyes snapped open. Through the rain, she could see the flash of red and white lights, hear the whoop of the siren cutting through the traffic. Her heart started to hammer against her ribs. The pain in her abdomen seemed to pulse in time with the emergency lights. No, 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 no. Ms. Hale, they're here to help you. Get away from me. She tried to push Martin's hands off her shoulders, but she had no strength left. The world was starting to tilt and swim. I won't. I can't. The paramedics were climbing out of the ambulance, grabbing their gear, moving with practiced efficiency. They'd load her up, take her away, strap her down. She'd be helpless, trapped, at their mercy, just like her mother. Just like her mother. No! This time it came out as a scream. Victoria lunged to her feet, or tried to. Her legs gave out immediately and she went down hard, her knees cracking against the wet pavement. The pain exploded into something beyond description, beyond thought. She heard herself keening, a high animal sound she didn't recognize. Hands grabbed her. Voices shouted. The world fractured into a kaleidoscope of rain and lights and pain. And then another voice cut through the chaos. Everyone step back! It wasn't loud. It wasn't authoritative in the way her lawyers sounded, or commanding like her executives. It was just certain, like gravity, like a fact. The hands on her shoulders loosened. Victoria blinked through the rain and the pain and saw a man pushing through her circle of concerned employees. He wasn't one of hers. She'd never seen him before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a canvas jacket that had seen better decades and jeans with oil stains at the knees. His boots were work boots, scuffed and practical. His hair was dark and wet, plastered to his forehead. He looked like he'd just crawled out from under a car, which, as it turned out, he had. Ma'am, he said, crouching in front of her. Can you hear me? Who the hell? Martin started. I'm a mechanic. The man didn't look at Martin. His eyes stayed fixed on Victoria's face. They were gray, or maybe blue, hard to tell in the rain. Heard the commotion. You need help. She needs to get in the ambulance, Martin snapped. We don't need... She's not getting in the ambulance. The man's voice stayed level. Look at her. She'd rather die out here. Victoria tried to focus on his face. The edges kept blurring. I don't need... Yeah, you do. He shifted closer, blocking out the rain with his body. Question is whether you're going to accept it or not. Sir, you need to move... One of the paramedics had arrived, a young woman with her hair in a tight bun. We've got this. No, you don't. The man glanced at her briefly, then back to Victoria. She's terrified. You come at her with a gurney and an IV, she's going to fight you. Might hurt herself worse. We're trained to handle... I'm sure you are. His tone wasn't dismissive, just matter of fact. But you've got maybe 30 seconds before she completely shuts down, and then it won't matter how trained you are. The paramedic opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Victoria, shaking, soaked, curled around her pain like a wounded animal, and something in her expression shifted. 30 seconds, she said. Then we're taking over. The man nodded once and turned his full attention back to Victoria. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Ethan Cole. I fix cars for a living. I've got a 9-year-old daughter who's probably wondering where I am right now. And about 4 years ago, my wife died because she was too scared to go to the hospital." Victoria stared at him. The pain was still there, a constant roar, but something in his words had cut through it. Or maybe it was the way he'd said them, flat, factual, like he was reading off a repair estimate. "She had a headache," Ethan continued. "Bad one, lasted 3 days. She kept saying it would pass, she just needed to rest." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. He paused, rain running down his face. "On the 4th day, I found her on the bathroom floor. Aneurysm. By the time I got her to the ER, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Victoria heard herself whisper. "Yeah, me too." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Every day I'm sorry. Every day I think about those 3 days I didn't push harder, didn't insist, didn't throw her over my shoulder and drag her in myself if I had to." He leaned in closer. She could smell motor oil and rain and something else, coffee maybe, black coffee from a gas station. "So here's the thing," he said quietly. "I can see you're scared. I don't know why, and I don't need to know why. But I can also see you're in serious pain, and it's getting worse, and whatever's happening inside you isn't going to fix itself because you will it to." "You don't understand." "You're right, I don't." His voice hardened slightly. "But I understand what it feels like to bury someone you could have saved, and I'm not doing that again, not if I can help it." Victoria's breath caught. The rain seemed to get louder, or maybe it was just the blood pounding in her ears. "The ambulance is right there," Ethan said, jerking his head toward the waiting vehicle. "Those paramedics know what they're doing. They're going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere clean, somewhere with people who can help you, and you're going to let them." "I can't." The words came out broken. "I can't do it. You don't know what—" "Time's up." The female paramedic was back, her partner beside her with a collapsible gurney. "Sir, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we need to—" Ethan held up one hand. The paramedic stopped, more from surprise than obedience. "1 more minute," he said, then to Victoria. "What happened?" "What?" "To make you this afraid. What happened?" No one had ever asked her that. In 34 years, through business deals and boardroom battles and relationships that had crashed and burned, no one had ever looked at her fear and asked for its origin story. "My mother," Victoria said, and her voice cracked on the word. "I was 7. She went in for surgery and she never came out. She died there, in a hospital bed, alone." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Water dripped from his hair onto his jacket. "You weren't alone, though," he said finally. "Were you? When she died?" "No. I was in the waiting room. They wouldn't let me see her until—" Victoria stopped. The memory was too sharp, too immediate. Until it was too late. "So you were there, at the hospital, and you survived it." I'm not trying to be a smartass." Ethan's expression was serious, almost gentle. "I'm saying you've already done the thing you're most afraid of. You've already been in a hospital while someone you loved was dying, and you made it through." "Barely," Victoria whispered. "But you did." He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and rested his hand on her shoulder. His palm was warm through the soaked fabric of her blouse. "You were 7 years old and you survived the worst day of your life. You think you can't handle this now? When you're not 7 anymore, when you're not helpless." The pain spiked again, and Victoria gasped, doubling over. Ethan's hand stayed on her shoulder, steady as a stone. "She's going into shock," the male paramedic said urgently. "We need to move now." "Victoria," Ethan's voice cut through the rising panic in her chest. "Look at me." She did. His eyes were definitely gray, she decided, storm cloud gray. "You can do this," he said. "I know you can. Because you've already done harder things. You've already survived worse. This is just one more thing, one more challenge. And on the other side of it, you get to keep living. I don't—" Her throat closed up. "I don't want to be alone." Something flickered across Ethan's face. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. "Okay," he said simply. "Then you won't be." He stood up and turned to the paramedics. "I'm riding with her." "Sir, we can't allow—" "I'm all she's got right now." Ethan's tone brooked no argument. You want her to cooperate? I'm part of the package. The two paramedics exchanged glances. The woman sighed. Fine, but you stay out of our way. Deal. Ethan looked down at Victoria, extended his hand. Come on, he said. Let's go fix this. Victoria stared at his outstretched palm, calloused, stained with grease that probably never fully washed out. The hand of someone who worked for a living, who built things and broke things and put them back together. The hand of a stranger who had no reason to care if she lived or died. She took it. The world lurched as Ethan helped her to her feet. The paramedics moved in immediately, supporting her on either side. The gurney appeared beneath her, and suddenly she was lying down, staring up at the rain-dark sky. Straps clicked across her chest and legs. Not tight, not restraining, just secure. Heart rate's elevated, the woman said, clipping something to Victoria's finger. BP's dropping. We need to move. They were lifting her, rolling her. The ambulance loomed in front of her like an open mouth. Victoria's entire body tensed. Her fingers scrabbled for purchase on the sides of the gurney. Then Ethan was there, walking beside her, his hand closing over hers. I'm right here, he said. Not going anywhere. They loaded her into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed to life. And Victoria Hale, who controlled everything, who trusted no one, who had sworn she would never set foot in a hospital again, closed her eyes and held on to a stranger's hand while the world rushed past outside. The inside of the ambulance was cramped and bright and smelled like antiseptic and plastic. Victoria kept her eyes squeezed shut, focusing on the pressure of Ethan's hand around hers. If she didn't look, maybe she could pretend she was somewhere else. Anywhere else. Victoria. The female paramedic's voice was calm, professional. I'm Sarah. I need to ask you some questions, okay? Can you tell me where the pain is? Victoria's jaw clenched. Lower right abdomen. When did it start? During dinner. Maybe an hour ago. Was it sudden or gradual? Gradual. Then sudden. Then... She gasped as the ambulance hit a pothole and the pain exploded fresh. Fucking hell. Scale of 1 to 10? 15. Okay. Sarah's hands were quick and efficient, checking Victoria's pulse, adjusting the oxygen mask someone had fitted over her face. Any nausea? Vomiting? No, maybe. I don't know. History of abdominal issues? Previous surgeries? No. Medications? None. Allergies? Penicillin. Sarah made a note on her tablet. The male paramedic, Victoria couldn't remember if he'd said his name, was doing something with an IV bag. The sight of the needle made her stomach lurch. Hey, Ethan squeezed her hand. Eyes on me, not on him. Victoria turned her head. Ethan had wedged himself into a corner of the ambulance, perched on what looked like a supply box. His jacket was dripping onto the floor. Tell me about your daughter, Victoria said. The words came out muffled through the oxygen mask, but he seemed to understand. Lily. A small smile touched his mouth. She's 9, smart as hell. Wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up. Long way from fixing cars. Yeah, well, I told her she should dream bigger than me. You're in an ambulance with a stranger, Victoria pointed out. Feels pretty big to me. The smile widened slightly. Fair point. Stick, the male paramedic warned. Victoria barely felt the IV needle slide in. She was too focused on Ethan's face, on the way rainwater was still dripping from his hair. Does Lily know where you are? She asked. She's with my sister tonight. Friday sleepover tradition. Ethan glanced at his watch. They're probably elbow deep in popcorn and Disney movies right now. Won't even notice I'm late. You should call her. After we get you sorted. Victoria closed her eyes again. The ambulance swayed around a corner and her stomach turned over. The pain was constant now, a grinding ache punctuated by sharp jabs that stole her breath. Sarah, the male paramedic said quietly, BP's still dropping. I see it. Sarah's voice stayed calm, but Victoria heard the edge underneath. How far out are we? 4 minutes. 4 minutes. 240 seconds. Victoria had negotiated billion-dollar deals in less time. She'd fired executives and hired replacements and restructured entire divisions. 4 minutes was nothing. 4 minutes felt like forever. Victoria, Sarah was back in her line of sight. I need you to stay with me, okay? Keep talking. Tell me about your work. Real estate, Victoria managed. Development. I buy buildings and make them better. What kind of buildings? Anything. Everything. Residential, commercial, mixed use. I just closed an $800 million project. $800 million. Ethan let out a low whistle. Damn. And here I get excited when I land a transmission rebuild. Despite everything, Victoria felt her mouth twitch. Different scales. Yeah, but same principle, right? Take something broken, figure out what it needs, put in the work to fix it, I suppose. So you're good at fixing things. Buildings, Victoria corrected. I'm good at fixing buildings. Buildings are easier than people, Ethan said. They don't argue back. You'd be surprised. The ambulance slowed. Sarah moved toward the back doors. We're here, she said. Memorial General. They're ready for you. Memorial General. The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. She knew that hospital. Of course she did. She'd donated to their expansion fund 3 years ago, had her name put on a plaque in the main lobby. She'd walked past it a dozen times for photo ops and ribbon cuttings, and had never once gone beyond the administrative wing. It was also where her mother had died. No. The word came out sharp, panicked. Not this one. Different hospital. Any other. This is the closest trauma center, Sarah said firmly, and you don't have time to be picky. The doors opened. Cold air and bright lights flooded in. Victoria could see the emergency entrance, the big red emergency sign blazing against the night sky. People in scrubs were waiting with another gurney. I can't. Victoria's free hand clutched at Ethan's jacket. I can't go in there, please. Not there. Why not? Ethan asked. It's where she... Victoria couldn't finish. Her throat had closed up completely. Understanding dawned in Ethan's eyes. He looked at the hospital entrance, then back at her. Okay, he said quietly. Listen to me. That was 27 years ago. Different doctors, different equipment, different everything. The only thing that's the same is the building, and buildings are just buildings. You know that better than anyone. It's not... It is. His voice was gentle but unyielding. It's just a building, bricks and glass and whatever else you rich people use. It doesn't have power over you unless you give it power. The paramedics were already moving, transferring her from their gurney to the hospitals. Ethan stood up but didn't let go of her hand. Besides, he added, I'll be right there, remember? You're not doing this alone. They were moving now, wheeling her toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Victoria's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The smell hit her first. That specific combination of disinfectant and floor wax and something else. Something indefinable but unmistakable. Hospital smell. The smell that lived in her nightmares. The lights were too bright. The hallway too long. Voices echoed off the walls, calling out codes and room numbers and patient names. A child was crying somewhere. A phone was ringing. Everything was too much, too loud, too fast. Room 3! Someone shouted. Move! They burst through a doorway into organized chaos. The room was full of people in scrubs, all moving with purpose. Someone was pulling up her shirt, pressing cold hands against her abdomen. Someone else was adjusting the IV. A doctor materialized beside her, young and female, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Hale, I'm Dr. Patterson. Can you tell me where it hurts? Victoria tried to point, but her hand was still locked around Ethan's. Dr. Patterson's eyes flicked to their joined hands, then to Ethan. Are you family? No, Ethan said. Just a friend. Then I'm sorry, but you'll need to... He stays. Victoria's voice came out as a rasp. He stays or I leave. Dr. Patterson hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but stand over there and don't touch anything. Ethan moved to the corner, still holding Victoria's hand, stretching his arm across the room. It was awkward and impractical and probably violated a dozen hospital protocols. Victoria didn't care. Classic presentation, someone muttered. Rebound tenderness, guarding. White count? Elevated. 17,000. Temperature? 100.8. Dr. Patterson's hands were gentle but thorough, pressing carefully on Victoria's abdomen. When she hit a spot just above the right hip, Victoria arched off the table with a scream. Positive McBurney's point, Dr. Patterson said calmly. I need an ultrasound in here now. And Page surgery. Tell them we've got a hot appy coming up. Appy? Victoria gasped. What's appendicitis? Dr. Patterson explained, already moving to a computer terminal. Your appendix is inflamed, probably infected. We need to get it out before it ruptures. Surgery. The word turned Victoria's blood to ice. No, no surgery. Ms. Hale, I said no. Victoria tried to sit up. Half a dozen hands pushed her back down. I'll take antibiotics. Whatever you have, but I'm not... If we don't operate, your appendix will burst. Dr. Patterson's voice was steady, factual. When that happens, the infection spreads throughout your abdominal cavity. It's called peritonitis. It's extremely serious. It can be fatal. People survive appendicitis without surgery, not in cases this advanced. Dr. Patterson pulled up something on the computer screen, an ultrasound image, gray and grainy. See this? Your appendix is severely distended. The wall is thinning. You're maybe hours away from rupture, possibly less. Victoria stared at the screen. The image meant nothing to her, just blobs of light and shadow. But the expression on Dr. Patterson's face meant everything. If I refuse? Victoria asked. Then you'll die. Dr. Patterson said it without drama, without inflection. Just a fact. Maybe not tonight. Maybe you'll make it another 12 hours, 24 if you're lucky. But the end result will be the same. The room went quiet. Even the ambient noise of the hospital seemed to fade away. Victoria turned her head to look at Ethan. He was still standing in the corner, still holding her hand across the impossible distance. His face was serious. Your call, he said quietly. But for what it's worth, I think you should let them help you. You don't understand. I understand you're scared. I understand this place has bad memories. I understand you've spent your whole life avoiding this exact situation. Ethan paused. I also understand that Lily's sitting in my sister's living room right now, watching Moana for the 10,000th time, and she has no idea that her dad is standing in a hospital ER trying to convince a stubborn woman to save her own life. That's not fair, Victoria whispered. No, it's not. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. But it's true. You've got people who care about you, Victoria. I've seen them. That whole crowd outside the restaurant, they were terrified for you. And I've got a kid who needs her dad to come home. So we're both here, in this place you hate, because life isn't fair and it isn't easy. And sometimes the only way forward is through the thing that scares you most. Dr. Patterson cleared her throat gently. Ms. Hale, I need an answer. Do we have your consent to operate? Victoria closed her eyes. She saw her mother's face, pale and still. She saw the waiting room where she'd sat for hours, legs swinging from a chair too big for her, waiting for news that never came. She saw the hospital chaplain who'd knelt down to deliver the worst words a 7-year-old could hear. She saw all of it, every terrible moment she'd spent the last 27 years trying to forget. Then she saw Ethan, this stranger who'd crawled out from under a car to save her life, who'd held her hand through the ambulance ride, who was standing in a corner of an ER, missing his daughter's movie night because he'd made a promise and he intended to keep it. She saw Martin and Kimberly and the rest of her team, still probably standing outside Marchese's in the rain, worried and helpless. She saw herself at 7 years old, too small to save anyone. And she saw herself now, 44 years old, CEO, billionaire, alive. Yes, Victoria said, opening her eyes. Do it. Dr. Patterson nodded once, already reaching for a phone. OR2, 10 minutes. Type and cross 4 units. Get anesthesia down here now. The room exploded into motion. People rushed in and out. Equipment appeared. Someone was explaining something about pre-op procedures, but Victoria wasn't listening. She was focused on Ethan's hand in hers, on the steady pressure that meant she wasn't alone. I have to let go now, Ethan said as they started wheeling her bed toward the door. They won't let me come any further. Wait, Victoria tightened her grip. I don't even know your last name. Cole. Ethan Cole. Thank you, Ethan Cole. Thank me when you wake up. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. You're going to wake up, Victoria, and when you do, you're going to realize you just did the bravest thing you've ever done in your life. They pulled her hand away from his. Victoria felt the loss of contact like a physical pain, separate from the fire in her abdomen. The gurney was moving faster now, through hallways that all looked the same, past faces she didn't recognize. The ceiling tiles rushed by overhead. White, textured, infinite. Someone was putting a mask over her face. The world started to blur at the edges. "Count backward from 10, a voice said. 10, Victoria whispered. 9, 8. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was a water stain on one of the ceiling tiles, shaped almost like a bird in flight. Then nothing. Ethan stood in the hallway long after they'd wheeled Victoria away, his hand still extended as if holding onto something that was no longer there. His fingers were cold where hers had been warm. "Sir?" A nurse appeared at his elbow, clipboard in hand. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." Ethan lowered his hand, flexing his fingers. "Yeah, I'm fine. You need to check in at registration if you're planning to wait. They'll need insurance information, next of kin." "I'm not family," Ethan said. I'm nobody." The nurse's expression softened. "Nobody who saved that woman's life tonight, from what I heard." Ethan shrugged. "Just happened to be in the right place." "Well, the right place is now the waiting room on the 3rd floor, surgery waiting area, if you want to stick around until she's out." Ethan checked his watch. It was nearly 11. Lily would be asleep by now, conked out on his sister's couch with popcorn crumbs in her hair. He should go home. He should check on his daughter, kiss her forehead, carry her to the car. He should stop getting involved in other people's emergencies. "3rd floor," he said. "Got it." The waiting room was exactly what you'd expect. Uncomfortable chairs in muted colors, magazines that were 6 months out of date, a TV playing the news on mute. 3 other people were scattered around the space. An elderly man dozing against the wall, a young couple holding hands and whispering, a woman in scrubs staring at her phone. Ethan picked a chair with a view of the door and sat down. The vinyl squeaked under his weight. He still smelled like motor oil. There was probably grease under his fingernails. He'd been in the middle of rotating tires on a Camry when he'd heard the commotion outside Marchese's. That felt like years ago now instead of hours. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister. "Lily's asleep. You good?" "Yeah," he typed back. "Might be late." "Don't wait up. You save another stray cat?" Ethan smiled despite himself. It had happened once. A kitten stuck in an engine block, yowling its head off. He'd spent 2 hours extracting it with a flashlight and a can of tuna. Lily had named it Sparkplug, and it now ruled their apartment with an iron paw. "Something like that," he texted. "Tell Lily I love her." "Will do. Get some sleep." Sleep seemed unlikely. Ethan leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. He kept thinking about Victoria's eyes, the terror in them when she'd seen the hospital, the way her whole body had gone rigid when they'd mentioned surgery. He knew that kind of fear. He'd seen it in Sarah's eyes during those last 3 days. His wife had been terrified of hospitals too, though she'd never quite said why. Bad experiences, maybe. She'd grown up poor, moved around a lot, probably saw the inside of too many understaffed emergency rooms, too many indifferent doctors. So when the headaches started, she'd toughed it out, taken over-the-counter painkillers, closed herself in dark rooms, insisted she was fine. And Ethan had believed her because he'd wanted to believe her, because acknowledging the truth would have meant forcing her to face her fear, and he'd loved her too much to do that. Until the morning he'd found her collapsed on the bathroom floor, blood vessels burst behind her eyes, brain swelling against her skull. The ambulance ride had been 17 minutes. The doctors had worked for 3 hours. And in the end, none of it had mattered. Sarah had died because she'd been too afraid to ask for help, and Ethan had let her. He'd promised himself, standing in a different hospital waiting room 4 years ago, that he would never let that happen again. If he saw someone in trouble, someone scared and hurting and convinced they could handle it alone, he would push. He would interfere. He would be the asshole who wouldn't take no for an answer. Even if that someone was a billionaire real estate developer who probably owned half the city and definitely didn't need help from a mechanic who smelled like he'd been rolling around in a garage. Which, to be fair, he had been. "Mr. Cole?" Ethan looked up. A surgeon stood in his doorway, still in scrubs. a surgical cap pushed back on his head. He was maybe 50, with tired eyes and the kind of steady hands you'd trust with a scalpel. Yeah? Ethan stood up. Is she? She's fine. Surgery went well. We got the appendix out before it ruptured, but it was close. Another hour or two and we'd be looking at a very different outcome. The relief hit Ethan like a wave. His knees actually buckled slightly, and he had to catch himself on the back of the chair. So she's okay, he said. It wasn't quite a question. She's okay. She'll be in recovery for a bit, then we'll move her to a regular room. She should be able to go home in a day or two, assuming no complications. The surgeon paused. The nurses told me you're the one who got her to come in. She needed help. Well, your timing was good. Appendicitis is nothing to mess around with. When they rupture, he shook his head. Let's just say you probably saved her life tonight. Can I see her? Not for a while. She's still under. Once she's in a room and awake, we can let family in. Are you? No, just a friend. The surgeon's expression suggested he didn't quite believe that, but he didn't push. I'll have someone come get you when she's ready for visitors. Could be a couple hours. I'll wait. The surgeon nodded and left. Ethan sank back into the chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright for the past 3 hours drained away all at once, leaving him hollow and shaky. She was okay. Victoria Hale, who he'd met 90 minutes ago in the rain outside a fancy restaurant, was going to live. Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sarah's number. He'd never deleted it. Couldn't bring himself to. Sometimes when he was having a bad day, he'd call it just to hear her voicemail message. Hey, this is Sarah. Leave a message. Or don't. I'm bad at checking these anyway. He didn't call tonight, just stared at her name on the screen. I did it, he said quietly to the empty waiting room. This time, I did it. His phone didn't answer. The fluorescent lights kept humming. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself breathe. 3 hours turned into 4. 4 turned into 5. Ethan watched the night bleed into early morning through the waiting room windows, the sky shifting from black to deep purple to that pale gray that meant dawn was coming, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The elderly man had been collected by his family around 2 a.m., tearful and relieved. The young couple had left shortly after, holding each other up as they walked to the elevator. The woman in scrubs had pulled a double shift and gone home somewhere around 4, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. Ethan had the waiting room to himself now. He'd moved through 3 cups of terrible vending machine coffee and a package of stale crackers that tasted like cardboard. His back ached from the vinyl chairs. His phone was down to 12% battery. He should leave. He'd done his part. Victoria was alive, she was in surgery recovery, she had an entire team of medical professionals taking care of her. She didn't need a mechanic with grease under his fingernails keeping vigil in a waiting room. But every time he stood up to go, something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of her hand in his, cold and shaking. Maybe it was the promise he'd made. You won't be alone. Maybe it was just the fact that when she woke up, confused and hurting in a place she'd spent 27 years avoiding, it would be nice if there was at least one familiar face, even if that face belonged to a complete stranger. Mr. Cole? Ethan jerked awake. He hadn't even realized he'd dozed off. A nurse stood in the doorway, different from the one earlier. Older, with gray streaks in her dark hair, and the kind of competent energy that suggested she'd seen everything twice. Yeah, that's me. He scrubbed a hand over his face, trying to shake off the fog of exhaustion. Ms. Hale is in room 412. She's awake and asking for you. That brought him fully alert. She is? Sounds surprised. The nurse's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. You must have made quite an impression. Ethan grabbed his jacket and followed her to the elevator. The hospital was quieter at this hour, the frenetic energy of the ER replaced by the calm efficiency of the graveyard shift. Their footsteps echoed on the linoleum. How is she? Ethan asked as the elevator doors closed. Stable. Vitals are good. Pain's controlled. She's a little disoriented, but that's normal coming off anesthesia. The nurse glanced at him. Fair warning, she's been asking questions. A lot of questions. Wants to know who performed the surgery, what medication she's on, when she can leave, whether the attending has board certification. That sounds about right. You know her well? Not at all, Ethan admitted. Met her about 6 hours ago. The nurse's eyebrows rose, but she didn't comment. The elevator chimed and the doors opened onto the fourth floor. The hallway was dimly lit, most of the rooms dark. A nurse's station glowed at the far end like a small island of fluorescence. Room 412 was halfway down on the left. The door was open a crack, light spilling out into the corridor. 15 minutes, the nurse said. She needs rest. Understood. Ethan pushed the door open slowly, not sure what he'd find. Victoria was propped up in the hospital bed, her dark hair tangled against the pillow. Someone had gotten her into a hospital gown, pale blue, standard issue, the kind that never quite closed all the way in the back. An IV line ran into her left arm. Monitors beeped softly beside the bed, tracking heart rate and oxygen levels. She looked smaller than she had outside the restaurant, vulnerable in a way that probably would have pissed her off if she'd known. Her eyes were open, though, and sharp. When she saw him, something in her expression shifted. Relief, maybe. "You're still here?" she said. Her voice was hoarse, probably from the breathing tube they'd used during surgery. "Told you I'd wait." Ethan moved to this chair beside the bed and sat down. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone cut me open and rearranged my insides." Victoria shifted slightly and winced, which I suppose is exactly what happened. "Surgery went well. Doctor said they got the appendix out clean." "Dr. Matthews, I've already interrogated him. Also the anesthesiologist, the surgical nurse, and the poor resident who made the mistake of checking on me." Victoria's mouth twisted. "I'm being difficult." "You're being you." "Is there a difference?" Ethan smiled. "Probably not." They sat in silence for a moment. The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang twice and stopped. "I don't remember getting here," Victoria said finally. "I remember the ambulance. I remember you holding my hand. Then nothing until I woke up in recovery with a nurse telling me the surgery was over." "That's the anesthesia. They knocked you out pretty good." "I hate that." Victoria's fingers plucked at the blanket. "Not being in control. Not knowing what happened while I was gone." "Nothing bad happened. They fixed you. That's all." "That's all," Victoria repeated. She looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. "Why are you still here, Ethan?" "Wanted to make sure you were okay." "You don't even know me." "No," Ethan agreed, "but I made you a promise. Figured I should stick around long enough to see it through." Victoria's expression did something complicated. "You could have left hours ago, and I never would have known." "Yeah, I could have." "But you didn't." "No." "Why?" Ethan leaned back in the chair, considering. Outside the window, the sky was getting lighter. The city was starting to wake up, cars on distant streets, lights coming on in apartments, the first stirrings of Saturday morning. 4 years ago, he said slowly, I sat in a waiting room a lot like the one downstairs. Different hospitals, same chairs. I sat there for 3 hours while doctors tried to save my wife, and when it was over, when they came out to tell me she didn't make it, you know what I kept thinking? Victoria shook her head. I kept thinking about all the times I could have pushed harder, could have insisted she go to the ER, could have thrown her over my shoulder and carried her there myself if I had to. Ethan's jaw tightened. I kept thinking that if I'd just been less understanding, less patient, less willing to accept her excuses, she might still be alive. That's not your fault, Victoria said quietly. No, it's not. Took me a long time to believe that, but I do now. It was her choice, her fear. I couldn't have saved her unless she wanted to be saved. He met Victoria's eyes. But tonight, with you, you wanted to be saved. You were just too scared to do it on your own. So I stuck around to make sure you didn't have to. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was rough. Thank you. You already said that. I'm saying it again. She paused. I don't usually do this. Do what? Thank people. Ask for help. Let strangers see me. She gestured vaguely at herself. The hospital gown, the IV, the vulnerability of being flat on her back in a bed. Like this. Yeah, I got that impression. I've built my entire career on being self-sufficient, not needing anyone, not showing weakness. How's that working out for you? The corner of Victoria's mouth lifted. Well, I'm a billionaire, so pretty well, generally speaking, except for the part where you almost died because you were too stubborn to admit you needed help. Except for that part, Victoria acknowledged. She shifted again, trying to find a comfortable position. The movement made her grimace. You need more pain meds? Ethan asked. I need to get out of this bed and go back to my life. But even as she said it, Victoria sank back against the pillow. The doctor said 2 days minimum. 2 days. Do you know how much work I'm going to miss? Do you know how dead you'd be if you'd gotten your way? That shut her up. Victoria stared at the ceiling for a moment, her jaw working. Point taken, she said finally. The door opened and a different nurse came in, younger than the one who'd brought Ethan up. She had a cheerful smile that seemed at odds with the early hour. Good morning, Ms. Hale. How are we feeling? Like I've been stabbed, Victoria said flatly. That's pretty normal post-appendectomy. The nurse moved to check the monitors, making notes on a tablet. Your vitals look good, though. Heart rate's a little elevated, but that's to be expected. When can I leave? Doctor. Matthews will make that call, but typically we like to keep appendectomy patients for 48 hours. Make sure there's no infection, no complications. 48 hours, Victoria repeated, like the words tasted bad. Could be longer if you don't rest. The nurse gave her a pointed look, which means staying in bed, not answering work emails, and definitely not trying to run your company from a hospital room. How did you... You're the third patient I've had this month who tried to take business calls from recovery. It never goes well. The nurse finished her notes and headed for the door. There's a call button if you need anything. Try to get some sleep. She left. Victoria looked at Ethan. I'm not going to be able to sleep, she said. Because of the pain? Because I can't stop thinking. Victoria's fingers found the blanket again, pleating the fabric. This place, being here. It's like I'm 7 years old again, waiting for someone to tell me my mother's dead. Except you're not 7, and you're not dying. I know that logically, but logic and fear don't always talk to each other. Ethan understood that better than most people. What happened to your mother, if you don't mind me asking? Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she started talking, her voice low and distant. She had gallbladder surgery, supposed to be routine, laparoscopic, same-day procedure. She went in at 8 in the morning and they told me I could see her by noon. Victoria's eyes were fixed on something Ethan couldn't see, something in the past. Only noon came and went, then 1 o'clock, then 2. The nurses kept saying any minute now, but nobody would tell me what was happening. Where was your father? Dead. Heart attack when I was 3. Barely remember him. Victoria's hand moved to her abdomen, fingers ghosting over the bandage beneath the hospital gown. It was just me and my mom. She was all I had. What went wrong? Infection. They nicked something during the surgery, didn't realize it. By the time they figured it out, sepsis had already set in. Victoria's voice went flat, clinical. She coded twice on the table. They brought her back the first time, not the second. Jesus. They didn't even let me say goodbye. Said I was too young, it would be too traumatic. Victoria laughed, bitter. Like not saying goodbye was somehow less traumatic. Like the last image I have of my mother being her walking away down a hospital hallway waving at me was better than, I don't know, closure maybe. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Sorry seemed inadequate. Any platitude would have been worse. I went into foster care after that, Victoria continued. Bounced around between 3 different families before I turned 18. None of them were particularly bad. None of them were particularly good either. They were just temporary. Everything was temporary. That's why you don't trust people. That's why I don't need people, Victoria corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Victoria turned her head to look at him. You think you've got me all figured out after one night? I think you're terrified of being vulnerable. I think you've spent 30 years building walls so high nobody can see over them. And I think tonight those walls almost killed you. Bold words from a man who fixes cars for a living. Hey, cars I understand. They break down, you figure out why. You fix them. People are messier. People are impossible, Victoria said, but there was no heat in it. She sounded tired. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. Trust. Let people help. Be... She gestured vaguely at the hospital room. Helpless. You're not helpless. You're recovering. There's a difference. Victoria's eyes drifted closed. I don't like it. Yeah, I got that impression. They sat in silence. Ethan could see Victoria fighting to stay awake, her pride not willing to concede to exhaustion. But the drugs in her system had other ideas. Her breathing gradually deepened, her face relaxing in increments. Ethan stood up carefully, not wanting to wake her. He should go. It was past 6 in the morning now. Lily would be up soon, wondering where he was. He needed to shower, change clothes, check his messages, figure out which appointments he'd blown off last night. He made it halfway to the door before Victoria spoke. Ethan? He turned. Her eyes were still closed, but she was clearly awake. Yeah? Will you come back? The question came out small, uncertain. Nothing like the woman who'd tried to negotiate her way out of an ambulance. Later, after you've dealt with whatever you need to deal with. You want me to? I don't. Victoria stopped, seemed to reconsider. Yes, I would like that. Okay, Ethan said. I'll come back. You don't have to. I know you have your daughter and your work, and I'm just some random woman who… Victoria. She opened her eyes. I'll come back, Ethan repeated. Get some sleep. This time when he left, she didn't call him back. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. Ethan's reflection in the polished doors looked like hell, hair sticking up, stubble dark on his jaw, eyes red from lack of sleep. His jacket still smelled like rain and motor oil. The lobby was busier now, the morning shift arriving. Doctors with coffee cups and nurses comparing notes and visitors clutching flowers and balloons. Ethan pushed through the automatic doors into the cool morning air. The rain from last night had left everything washed clean and sharp. The sky was pale blue, streaked with pink on the eastern horizon. Cars hissed past on wet streets. Somewhere a church bell was ringing, marking the hour. Ethan's van was still parked outside Marchese's, 3 blocks away. He'd left it with the hazards on, hood open, the Camry he'd been working on jacked up beside it. The Camry's owner had probably called a dozen times, wondering where the hell their car was. He walked the 3 blocks, hands in his pockets, breathing in the cold morning air. His body ached in places he'd forgotten could ache. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something that felt almost like peace. Sarah would have liked Victoria, he thought. She would have appreciated the armor, understood the fear underneath. Sarah had been good at seeing people, really seeing them past whatever front they put up. I think I did okay, Ethan said quietly to the empty street. I think you would have been proud. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of wet concrete and coffee from a shop just opening its doors. It wasn't an answer, but it felt like one anyway. His van was exactly where he'd left it, ticket flapping under the windshield wiper. $50 fine for illegal parking. Worth it. The Camry's owner had indeed called, 6 times, plus 3 increasingly irritated text messages. Ethan sent back a quick apology, promised to have the car done by noon, and climbed into the van. The engine turned over with its familiar rough cough. He sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Then he put it in gear and headed home. His apartment was on the south side, 4th floor of a building that had probably been nice in 1975. The elevator worked maybe 60% of the time. The hallway carpet was worn thin in spots. But the rent was reasonable, and the neighbors were quiet, and Mrs. Chen on the 3rd floor always had extra dumplings on Sundays. Ethan let himself in quietly, just in case Lily had come home early. But the apartment was empty, morning light slanting through the windows onto furniture that had seen better days. The couch where Sarah used to curl up with a book. The coffee table with the water ring that wouldn't come out. The photos on the wall, Lily as a baby, Lily's first day of school, Lily holding Sparkplug the cat like a very annoyed football. The shower was hot and lasted maybe 20 minutes. Ethan stood under the spray until the water started running cold, washing away the smell of hospital and rain and fear. His reflection in the foggy mirror looked more human afterward. Still tired, but human. He was halfway through a cup of coffee when his phone rang. His sister. You survived the night? Rachel's voice was amused. Lily's asking when you're picking her up. Can I have another hour? I need to check on the garage, make sure nothing burned down while I was gone. Sure, but you're buying donuts. Deal. What happened last night anyway? Your text was cryptic as hell. Ethan considered how much to explain. Helped someone who needed help. No big deal. Uh-huh. Rachel knew him too well. Does someone have a name? Victoria. Victoria. Rachel drew the name out. And what does Victoria do? Real estate, development. So you met a real estate developer at 11 o'clock on a Friday night? It's complicated. It always is with you. But Rachel's voice was fond. Fine, keep your secrets. Bring donuts when you come. The good ones from Pearl Street, not the grocery store crap. Yes, ma'am. He hung up and finished his coffee standing by the window, looking out at the city coming awake. People walking dogs, heading to work, living their normal Saturday morning lives. Nobody out there knew that last night a woman had almost died from stubbornness and fear. Nobody knew that Ethan had sat in a waiting room for 5 hours because he'd made a promise to a stranger. It all felt both enormous and insignificant at the same time. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Martin Chen, Ms. Hale's VP of Development. The hospital gave me your information. We wanted to thank you for what you did last night. If there's anything we can do. Ethan stared at the message. He could think of about a dozen things Victoria's company could do for him. New equipment for the garage, help with Lily's college fund. Hell, probably just buy him a whole new building. He deleted the text without responding. The garage was a 20-minute drive, tucked between a laundromat and a faux restaurant in a part of town that gentrification hadn't quite reached yet. The sign above the door read Cole Automotive in faded letters. The bay doors were closed, but Ethan could see light underneath. Marcus had opened up, probably wondering where the hell his boss was. You're alive, Marcus said when Ethan walked in. He was under a Honda Civic, just his legs visible. I was starting to wonder. Long night. The Camry owner called, twice. I know, I'll get it done. Marcus rolled out from under the Civic, wiping his hands on a rag. He was 23, built like a linebacker, with a talent for diagnostics that bordered on supernatural. Ethan had hired him 2 years ago and never regretted it. You look like shit, Marcus observed. Feel like it too. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Cool. Marcus rolled back under the Civic. The sound of a ratchet echoed in the garage. Coffee's in the office. Probably tastes like battery acid by now, but it's got caffeine. Ethan poured himself a cup anyway and got to work on the Camry. The rhythm of it was soothing. The familiar weight of tools in his hands. The puzzle of mechanical problems with logical solutions. Rotate the tires, check the brakes, top off the fluids. Simple, straightforward, nothing like people. He was finishing up when his phone rang again. Different number this time, also unknown. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, this is Dr. Matthews from Memorial General. I'm calling about Victoria Hale. Ethan's chest tightened. Is she okay? She's fine. Better than fine, actually. Recovery is progressing well. Dr. Matthews paused. She's also being extremely difficult about following post-op instructions. Despite himself, Ethan smiled. That sounds about right. She's trying to check herself out. AMA. Against medical advice. I've explained that she needs to stay for observation, but she's insisting she'll recover better at home. Another pause. She asked me to call you. Said you might be able to talk sense into her. Me? Apparently you're the only person she's listened to in the last 12 hours. Dr. Matthews sounded equal parts exasperated and amused. Any chance you could come down here and help me convince my patient not to be an idiot? Ethan checked his watch. 10:30. He'd promised Rachel he'd pick up Lily in half an hour. Give me an hour, he said. I'll try to stall her that long. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Ethan hung up and looked at Marcus, who'd rolled out from under the Civic and was watching him with interest. Let me guess, Marcus said. The long night isn't over yet. Apparently not. This have anything to do with that billionaire lady who got rushed to the hospital last night? Because that's all over the news. Ethan blinked. What? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed him. Sure enough, there it was, a headline on the local news site. Real estate mogul Victoria Hale hospitalized after emergency surgery. The article was light on details but heavy on speculation. There was even a photo. Victoria at some charity gala, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Ethan's van, and smiling the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's her, Ethan said. You know her? Sort of. It's complicated. Marcus grinned. Dude, you saved a billionaire's life. I helped someone who needed help. The billionaire part is irrelevant. Is it though? Marcus was still grinning. Because I'm pretty sure billionaires remember people who saved their lives. I'm just saying, maybe don't delete any phone numbers for a while. Ethan shook his head and grabbed his jacket. Hold down the fort. I'll be back this afternoon. Take your time. And hey, Marcus's expression turned serious. Good job. Sarah would have been proud. Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, I think so too. The drive back to Memorial General felt different in daylight. The streets were full of weekend traffic, families heading to soccer games and brunch spots. The hospital looked less ominous too, just another building against the sky. He stopped at Pearl Street Donuts on the way, bought a dozen of the good ones like he'd promised, then texted Rachel that he needed another hour. She sent back a string of eye-roll emojis but said fine. The fourth floor was busier than it had been at dawn. Nurses moving between rooms, doctors making rounds, the general hum of a hospital in full swing. Ethan nodded to the nurse at the station, the same gray-haired one from earlier, and headed for room 412. He could hear Victoria's voice before he even reached the door. Perfectly capable of managing my own recovery. I have a penthouse apartment with a full staff and access to private medical care if necessary. Ms. Hale, I understand that, but you had major abdominal surgery less than 12 hours ago. Minor surgery. You said yourself the appendix came out clean. Ethan knocked on the doorframe. Both Victoria and Dr. Matthews turned to look at him. Victoria was sitting up in bed, fully alert now, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd somehow acquired her phone and was holding it like a weapon. Doctor. Matthews stood beside the bed, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd been arguing with a brick wall. Thank God, the doctor said. Maybe you can talk sense into her. Probably not, Ethan said, but I can try. He walked into the room and set the donut box on the bedside table. Victoria's eyes flicked to it, then to him. You brought donuts, she said. Seemed like a donut kind of morning. Ethan looked at Dr. Matthews. Can you give us a minute? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, then I'm putting my foot down. He left, closing the door behind him. Ethan pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. So, he said, trying to break out already? I'm not breaking out. I'm exercising my right to make my own medical decisions. Uh-huh. And those decisions involve leaving the hospital less than 12 hours after they cut you open? It was laparoscopic, 3 small incisions, hardly cutting me open. Victoria. She had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I can't stay here, Ethan. I can't. Every minute in this room feels like drowning. Even though you know it's safe? Even though you know they're just trying to make sure you heal properly? Knowing something and feeling it are 2 different things. Victoria's fingers twisted in the blanket. I know I'm being irrational. I know the chances of anything going wrong are minimal. But I can't shake this feeling that if I stay here too long, something bad will happen. Like the building itself is cursed or something. Buildings aren't cursed, they're just buildings. I know that. Do you? Victoria glared at him. You're very annoying, you know that? I've been told. Ethan opened the donut box and pulled out a chocolate glazed. Here, eat something. I'm not hungry. Eat it anyway. You need your strength if you're going to argue with doctors all day. Victoria took the donut, more to humor him than out of any real desire. She bit into it and something in her expression softened slightly. These are good, she admitted. Pearl Street, best donuts in the city. They sat in silence for a moment, Victoria eating her donut and Ethan watching the monitors beep steadily beside the bed. I picked up Lily yet? Victoria asked suddenly. Not yet. My sister's watching her for another hour. You should go. You've already done more than enough. Is that your way of trying to get rid of me so you can sneak out? Maybe. Ethan smiled. Not gonna work. I promised I'd come back and I'm here. Also promised I wouldn't let you do anything stupid. I don't recall that specific promise. It was implied. Victoria set down what was left of her donut and looked at him seriously. Why do you care so much? I'm a stranger. You have your own life, your own problems. You don't owe me anything. No, I don't, Ethan agreed. But here's the thing. I spent 4 years wishing I'd pushed harder when it mattered. Wishing I'd been more annoying, more insistent, more willing to make my wife angry if it meant keeping her alive. And then last night I got a chance to actually do that. To be the guy who doesn't give up, who doesn't let fear win. So yeah, maybe I'm not doing this for you. Maybe I'm doing it for me, for Sarah, for the chance to get it right this time. Victoria's eyes were bright. She blinked rapidly, looking away. That's not fair, she said quietly. Life's not fair. We've established that already. Using your dead wife to guilt me into staying in the hospital, that's a low blow. Is it working? Victoria laughed, a short, surprised sound. Maybe. Good. Ethan stood up. I'm going to get Dr. Matthews. You're going to tell him you'll stay for the full 48 hours. Then I'm going to pick up my daughter and bring her back here so you can meet her. What? Why? Because Lily's going to want to know why I spent all night at a hospital. And I'm not lying to my kid. So you might as well meet her and prove you're worth all the fuss. Victoria looked stunned. I'm not good with children. Neither was I before I had one. You'll figure it out. Ethan headed for the door, then paused. Also for the record, you are worth the fuss, even if you don't believe it yet. He left before she could argue, pulling the door closed behind him. Dr. Matthews was waiting in the hallway, hope and skepticism warring on his face. Well, he asked. Give her 5 minutes, Ethan said. She'll agree to stay. You're sure? Pretty sure? What did you say to her? Ethan smiled. The truth. Lily was on the porch when Ethan pulled up to his sister's house, backpack already on her shoulders, bouncing on her toes like she'd been waiting for hours. Which she probably had been. Patience wasn't exactly in the 9-year-old playbook. Dad! She bounded down the steps before he'd even put the van in park. Where were you? Aunt Rachel said you had an emergency, but she wouldn't tell me what kind, and I thought maybe someone's car exploded or something because that would be so cool, but also scary, and breathe, Lil. Ethan climbed out and caught her in a hug. She smelled like maple syrup and strawberry shampoo. Nobody's car exploded. Then what happened? Rachel appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, wearing the expression that meant she was definitely going to ask questions later. Ethan gave her a wave that was equal parts gratitude and apology. I'll tell you on the way, he said to Lily. We've got a stop to make first. A stop? Where? Hospital. Lily pulled back, her dark eyes wide. Are you hurt? Did you get hurt? And you're just not telling me because you think I can't handle it? Because I totally can handle it, Dad. I'm not a baby anymore. I'm fine. Ethan ruffled her hair, which she hated but tolerated because she was worried. I'm not the one who needed the hospital. Someone else did. Someone I helped last night. Oh. Lily processed this, her face scrunching up the way it did when she was thinking hard. Like when you helped that lady change her tire in the rain? Or when you fixed Mr. Peterson's wheelchair for free? Kind of like that. Except this time it was a medical emergency. But you're not a doctor. No, but I was there when she needed help, and now I want you to meet her. Lily's expression shifted from worry to curiosity. Is she nice? She's complicated. What does that mean? It means you'll have to decide for yourself. The drive to Memorial General took 15 minutes, during which Ethan gave Lily the abbreviated version of last night's events. Woman in pain. Refused to go to hospital, Ethan convinced her. Surgery went well. Now she's recovering. He left out the parts about Victoria's terror and his own memories of Sarah dying. Some things didn't need to be explained to a 9-year-old. So she's rich? Lily asked as they pulled into the hospital parking garage. Very. Like, buy a yacht rich or just regular rich? I don't know if she has a yacht, but yeah, probably that kind of rich. Lily was quiet for a moment. Is she going to be weird about us being not rich? The question hit Ethan harder than it should have. I don't know, Lil. Maybe. Some people are like that. If she is, can we leave? If she is, we'll definitely leave. They walked through the parking garage hand in hand, Lily's small fingers wrapped around his. The hospital was even busier now, the lunch rush in full swing. The cafeteria smells, industrial coffee and something that might have been meatloaf, wafted through the corridors. This place is huge, Lily whispered as they waited for the elevator. How do people not get lost? Color-coded signs, see? Ethan pointed to the directional placards. Blue for main entrance, green for emergency, yellow for patient rooms. That's smart. Well, Lily studied the signs with the intensity she brought to everything. The kid noticed details most people missed. She'd be good at diagnostics someday if she ever decided marine biology wasn't for her. The fourth floor was quieter than the lobby. Ethan led Lily down the hallway, past the nurse's station where the gray-haired nurse from earlier gave him a knowing nod. Room 412's door was closed this time. Ethan knocked softly. "Come in." Victoria's voice muffled through the door. He pushed it open. Victoria was still in bed, but she'd made some improvements, hair brushed and pulled back properly. The hospital gown traded for what looked like silk pajamas that someone had probably brought from her apartment. Her laptop was open on the rolling table in front of her, and she was typing with the focused intensity of someone trying very hard not to think about where they were. She looked up when they entered, and her expression went through several rapid shifts. Surprise, uncertainty, something that might have been panic. "Hi," Ethan said. "This is Lily. Lil, this is Victoria." Lily stepped forward, extending her hand with the formal politeness Ethan had tried to teach her. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Victoria." Victoria stared at the offered hand like it might bite her. Then, slowly, she reached out and shook it. "Just Victoria is fine," she said. Her voice was careful, measured. "Nice to meet you too, Lily. Dad says you almost died last night." "Lily," Ethan started. "It's okay." Victoria's mouth twitched. "That's actually a fairly accurate assessment. Yes, I almost died." "That's scary," Lily said matter-of-factly. She dropped Victoria's hand and moved closer to the bed, examining everything with open curiosity. "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you did it anyway. Went to the hospital even though you didn't want to. Your father didn't give me much choice." Lily looked back at Ethan, something like pride on her face. "He's good at that. One time I didn't want to go to the dentist because I hate the sound the drill makes, and he sat with me the whole time and let me squeeze his hand so hard I left marks." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Did the dentist fix your tooth?" "Yeah, turned out it wasn't even that bad. I was scared for nothing." Lily shrugged with the wisdom of someone who'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Dad says being scared is okay, but letting it stop you from doing important things is not okay. Your father is very wise." "Sometimes," Lily grinned at Ethan. "Other times he puts his keys in the fridge and spends 20 minutes looking for them." "That was one time," Ethan protested. 3 times. "Okay, 3 times. But in my defense, I was very tired." Victoria was watching this exchange with something like fascination. Or maybe confusion. Probably both. "What are you working on?" Lily pointed at the laptop. "Oh, just some emails, work things. Dad said you buy buildings and make them better." "That's one way to put it, yes." "That sounds cool. Do you get to pick the paint colors?" "Sometimes. Usually I hire people to do that." "I would pick purple for everything," Lily announced. "Purple walls, purple floors, purple ceilings. People would call it the Purple Palace." "That would certainly be memorable." Lily moved to the window, looking out at the city spread below. "You can see so much from up here. There's my school, I think, and the library where Dad takes me on Saturdays." She pressed her hands against the glass. "Do you like being up high?" "I have a penthouse apartment," Victoria said slowly, like she was working out a puzzle. 23rd floor, so yes, I suppose I do." "Cool. We live on the 4th floor. The elevator breaks a lot." "That sounds frustrating." "It is. But Dad fixes it sometimes. He's good at fixing things." Lily turned back to face them, her expression thoughtful. "He couldn't fix Mom, though, when she got sick." The room went very quiet. Ethan's chest tightened. "Lily," he said softly. "It's true, though." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were sad. "You tried really hard, but you couldn't fix her. Because people aren't like cars. Sometimes they break and you can't put them back together." Victoria was staring at Lily like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. When she finally found her voice, it was rough around the edges. "I'm sorry about your mother," she said. "Thanks. I was 5 when she died, so I don't remember her as much as I want to." Lily sat down in the chair beside the bed, swinging her legs. "But Dad tells me stories. He says she was really funny, and she made the best pancakes, and she would have loved me a lot. I'm sure she would have. Dad says he helps other people now because he couldn't help her. Is that why he helped you? Ethan opened his mouth to deflect, to change the subject, to protect both Lily and Victoria from this conversation. But Victoria spoke first. I think so, she said quietly. Yes, I think that's exactly why he helped me. Lily nodded, satisfied. That's good. It's better to help people than to be sad all the time. That's what Aunt Rachel says. Aunt Rachel sounds smart. She is. She's a teacher. She teaches 7th grade and she says middle schoolers are wild, but she likes them anyway. Lily pulled a book out of her backpack, something with a dolphin on the cover. Do you mind if I read? Dad says we're staying for a while. I don't mind. Lily settled into the chair and opened her book, immediately absorbed in whatever aquatic adventure awaited on the pages. Ethan moved to the other side of the bed, lowering his voice. Sorry, he said to Victoria. She's got no filter. Don't apologize. Victoria's eyes were still on Lily. She's remarkable. She's something, that's for sure. How do you do it? Raise her alone? Badly, most days. But she's resilient. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, even quieter. I wasn't. Tough, I mean. When my mother died. You were 7. That's different. Is it? Lily was 5. Lily has me. You had nobody. Ethan glanced at his daughter, making sure she was still absorbed in her book. That's not a small thing, Victoria. Having someone versus having no one. I had foster families. But did you have family? Real family? People who loved you regardless? Victoria didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was written all over her face. They sat in silence for a while. Lily read her book. Victoria went back to her laptop, typing occasionally, but mostly just staring at the screen. Ethan watched the monitors beep their steady rhythm and thought about all the ways life bent people into shapes they never intended to become. A nurse came in around 1 to check Victoria's vitals and change her IV bag. She smiled at Lily, who looked up from her book long enough to smile back. How's our patient doing? The nurse asked. Stubborn, Victoria said. That's what I like to hear. Stubborn patients heal faster. The nurse made notes on her tablet. Pain level? Manageable. No translation. It hurts, but I'm too proud to admit it, Ethan said. Victoria glared at him. The nurse laughed. He's got your number, she said. I'll bring you something for the pain, whether you want it or not. She left. Victoria closed her laptop with more force than necessary. I don't need a babysitter, she said. Good thing I'm not babysitting. I'm just sitting. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, babysitters get paid. That surprised a laugh out of her. Short and rusty, like it didn't get used much, but genuine. Lily looked up from her book. Are you laughing? Apparently, Victoria said. Good. You should do it more. You look less scary when you laugh. I look scary? A little, but it's okay. Dad looked scary too when he was sad about Mom. Now he looks sad but trying, which is different. Ethan rubbed his face. Okay, new rule. No psychoanalyzing the adults. But I'm good at it, Lily protested. That's the problem. Oh, Victoria was looking at Lily with something approaching wonder. How old are you again? 9. Almost 10. My birthday's in April. You seem older. I get that a lot. Aunt Rachel says I'm an old soul. I don't know what that means, but it sounds important. The nurse returned with pain medication and a juice box, which she handed to Lily with a wink. Lily accepted it solemnly and went back to her book, occasionally slurping in a way that drove Ethan crazy, but he'd learned to pick his battles. Around 2 o'clock, Martin Chen showed up. He knocked tentatively, poking his head around the door like he expected to find Victoria in the middle of a board meeting, which, knowing Victoria, wasn't entirely unreasonable. Ms. Hale? I brought the files you requested. Oh. He stopped when he saw Ethan and Lily. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had visitors. Martin, this is Ethan Cole and his daughter Lily. Ethan, Lily, this is Martin Chen, my VP of Development. Martin's eyes went wide with recognition. You're the mechanic, the one who… Yeah, Ethan said. That's me. We've been trying to reach you. Martin set his briefcase down, fumbling with his phone. The company wants to do something to thank you, a reward, or maybe cover any expenses you incurred. I didn't incur any expenses. Still, we'd like to, I don't want anything, Ethan said firmly. I helped someone who needed help, that's all. Martin looked at Victoria, clearly hoping for backup. Victoria just shrugged. I already tried, she said. He's stubborn. Pot, meet kettle, Ethan muttered. Lily giggled from her chair. Martin hovered uncertainly, then seemed to remember why he was there. The Riverside files. You said you wanted to review them? Yes. Leave them on the table. Ms. Hale, with all respect, shouldn't you be resting? I'm lying in a bed. How much more resting do you want? The kind where you're not working through a post-op recovery. I'm fine, Martin. You had surgery 12 hours ago. 14 hours ago, and it was laparoscopic. Barely qualifies as surgery. Martin looked at Ethan again, desperate. Ethan held up his hands. Don't look at me. I already lost that fight. Technically you won, Victoria pointed out. I'm still here, aren't I? Only because I used emotional blackmail. Details. Martin watched this exchange with growing confusion. Then he seemed to make a decision, pulling a file from his briefcase. Fine. But I'm only giving you the summary reports. The detailed analysis can wait until you're out of here. Martin, non-negotiable, Ms. Hale. You want the files? Those are my terms. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Acceptable. Martin looked like he'd just won the lottery. He handed over the files, gave Ethan a grateful nod, and backed toward the door. I'll check in tomorrow, he said. Get some rest. Please. He left before Victoria could argue. She opened the top file and started reading, her expression shifting into something focused and intent. Ethan watched her for a moment. You're not going to rest at all, are you? This is resting. I'm in bed. I'm not on a construction site or in a boardroom. Relatively speaking, this is practically a vacation. Your definition of vacation is deeply concerning, says the man who probably works 7 days a week. 6. I take Sundays off for Lily. How noble! It's called being a parent. You should try it sometime. The words came out sharper than Ethan intended. Victoria's head snapped up, something wounded flashing across her face before she locked it down. I didn't mean... Ethan started. No, you're right. Victoria closed the file. I wouldn't know the first thing about being a parent. I can barely manage to take care of myself, as last night so clearly demonstrated. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Victoria's voice was level, but there was an edge underneath. I'm 44 years old, no husband, no kids, no family, just buildings and money and a penthouse apartment where I sleep alone. I'm exactly what you think I am. What do I think you are? Empty. Hollow. A successful shell with nothing inside. Lily looked up from her book, her face troubled. Ethan caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head. Stay out of it. I think you're scared, Ethan said quietly. I think you've been scared for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to not be scared. And I think you've built this life where you don't need anyone, because needing people means they can leave, they can die, they can hurt you in ways you can't control. Armchair psychology. How original. It's not psychology, it's recognition. Ethan leaned forward. I spent 2 years after Sarah died, convinced I didn't deserve to be happy. That if I let myself move forward, let myself heal, it meant I didn't love her enough. That I was betraying her memory somehow. What changed? Lily got sick, nothing serious, just a bad flu. But she had a fever and I was terrified, absolutely convinced I was going to lose her too. Ethan's hands tightened on the armrests. And then she got better. Because that's what kids do. They get sick and they get better. And I realized I'd spent 2 years so focused on loss that I'd forgotten how to see what I still had. Victoria was very still. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. All I know is that last night you were so afraid of dying like your mother that you nearly died from fear itself. And now you're sitting here working because work is safe, work is controllable, work can't die and leave you alone. But it also can't love you back. I don't need love. Everyone needs love. Dad's right, Lily said quietly. Both adults turned to look at her. She'd set down her book, her expression serious. When Mom died, Dad said we had 2 choices. We could shut down and stop feeling anything, or we could feel everything and help each other through it. He said, love is what makes us brave enough to feel things even when they hurt. Victoria's eyes were bright again. She blinked rapidly, looking away. Your daughter is wiser than both of us, she said, her voice rough. Yeah, I get that a lot. They sat in silence. Outside, the afternoon sun painted long shadows across the hospital room floor. A doctor walked past in the hallway, talking on his phone. Somewhere down the corridor, someone laughed. Victoria reached for her laptop, then stopped. Her hand hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she closed the computer instead. Tell me about your garage, she said. Ethan blinked. What? Your garage, your business. Tell me about it. Why? Because I've spent the last 12 hours thinking about death and fear and all the ways I've failed to live. And I would like to think about something else. Something real and tangible and built by someone who actually knows what they're doing. So Ethan told her about buying the garage 5 years ago with Sarah's life insurance money, about the neighborhood that was rough but improving, about Marcus and the handful of other mechanics he employed when business was good, about the customers who trusted him with their cars and their problems, and sometimes their life stories while they waited for an oil change. Lily chimed in occasionally, adding details Ethan forgot or got wrong. The time he'd stayed up all night to fix Mrs. Chen's car before her son's wedding. The customer who'd paid in homemade tamales because money was tight. The teenager he'd taught basic maintenance to for free because the kid reminded Ethan of himself at that age. Victoria listened to all of it with an attention that felt almost uncomfortable, like she was studying him, trying to understand a species she'd never encountered before. You care about these people, she said when he'd finished. They're my customers. No, you care about them as people, not just as business. Ethan shrugged. Kind of hard not to. You spend enough time with someone, hear their stories, help them out when they're in a bind. They stop being transactions and start being people. I don't think I've had a transaction become a person in years. Maybe you're doing transactions wrong, Victoria laughed, that same rusty sound from earlier. Maybe I am. A different nurse came in to check vitals again. She gave Lily a sticker, a cartoon starfish, and told Victoria her numbers looked good. The pain medication was working. If she kept improving at this rate, she might be able to go home tomorrow instead of Monday. Really? Victoria's face lit up in a way that made her look 10 years younger. Really? But you have to promise to actually rest. No working, no stress, just recovery. I promise. The nurse looked skeptical but didn't push it. She left with a reminder to press the call button if anything changed. You're not going to keep that promise, are you? Ethan asked. Absolutely not. But she doesn't need to know that. You're terrible. I'm efficient. You're going to work yourself into another emergency room visit. Not if I'm careful. Ethan shook his head, but he was smiling. There was something almost endearing about Victoria's complete inability to slow down, frustrating as hell, but endearing. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Mrs. Chen's daughter just dropped off a car. Transmission issue. You want me to handle it or wait for you? Ethan glanced at the time. Almost 4. He'd been at the hospital for 3 hours. I should go, he said, standing. Got a business to run. Victoria's face did something complicated. Of course. Thank you for coming and for bringing Lily. It was nice meeting you, Lily said, tucking her book into her backpack. I hope you feel better soon. Thank you, Lily. I hope you enjoy your book. I will. It's about dolphins who save a girl from drowning. They're super smart. I'm learning that intelligence runs in your family. Lily beamed. Ethan felt something warm and uncomfortable settle in his chest. They were almost to the door when Victoria called out, Ethan? He turned. Would it be... She hesitated, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Would it be all right if I called you after I'm discharged? Not for any particular reason, just to talk. Yeah, Ethan said. That would be all right. I don't have your number. He rattled it off and watched her type it into her phone with the same focused intensity she brought to everything else. Got it, she said. I'll call you. Okay? Okay. They stood there for an awkward moment, neither quite sure how to end this. Then Lily solved it by walking over and giving Victoria a quick, impulsive hug. Victoria froze, her arms coming up uncertainly before settling around Lily's small frame. She looked absolutely terrified. "Feel better," Lily said, pulling back. "And stop being scared of hospitals. They're just buildings with sick people in them. The building can't hurt you." "Right," Victoria said faintly. "Just buildings." Ethan took Lily's hand and led her out before his daughter could drop any more truth bombs on a woman who'd had major surgery less than 24 hours ago. In the elevator, Lily was quiet until they were halfway to the lobby. "I like her," she announced. "Yeah? Yeah, she's sad, but she's trying not to be. That's brave. When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You're just now noticing." Ethan laughed and pulled her into a side hug. "Fair point." They walked through the lobby and out into the afternoon sun. The air was cool and clean, washed by last night's rain. The city moved around them, people rushing, living, being. "Dad?" Lily looked up at him. "Are you going to be friends with Victoria now?" "Maybe. I don't know." "I think you should. She needs a friend." "What makes you say that?" "Because when you left the room to talk to that doctor earlier, she looked at you like you were the only real thing in the whole hospital. Like if you left, she'd disappear." Ethan stopped walking. "Lily, that's true?" Lily's expression was matter of fact. "I'm good at reading people, Dad. You taught me to pay attention, remember? Watch what people do, not just what they say." "I did teach you that, didn't I?" "Yep, so I'm watching. And I'm seeing someone who's lonely and scared and doesn't know how to ask for help. Kind of like you were after Mom died. Before Aunt Rachel made you start going to that support group." "How do you know about the support group?" "I have ears. And Aunt Rachel talks loud on the phone." Ethan sighed. His daughter was too observant by half. It was going to make her teenage years absolutely terrifying. They climbed into the van. Ethan started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage, but his mind was back in room 412, watching Victoria's face when Lily hugged her. The shock, the longing, the absolute terror of physical affection freely given. "Dad?" Lily's voice was small. "Yeah, Lil. Do you think Victoria's going to be okay?" "I think so. She's tough." "Being tough isn't the same as being okay." "No," Ethan agreed quietly. "No, it's not." They drove back to the garage in comfortable silence, Lily's hand in his across the center console. The city scrolled past outside the windows. Buildings Victoria probably owned, streets Victoria probably never walked down, neighborhoods Victoria existed above in her 23rd floor penthouse. Ethan thought about the distance between his world and hers, about oil stains and silk pajamas, about fourth-floor walk-ups with broken elevators and penthouses with views of the entire city, about the 1,000 small ways their lives were different. And then he thought about the one way they were the same, both of them doing their best to outrun grief, to build something meaningful from the wreckage of loss, to prove that surviving was worth the effort. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He waited until they reached the garage to check it. A text from an unknown number that could only be Victoria. "Thank you for everything. I mean it." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "You're welcome. Now put the phone down and actually rest." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Fine, but only because my doctor is very scary." Wise choice. "Talk soon?" "Yeah. Talk soon." Ethan put his phone away and looked at the garage, his business, his life. It wasn't much compared to real estate empires and billion-dollar deals, but it was real. It was his. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. "Come on, Lil," he said, climbing out of the van. "Let's see what Marcus broke while I was gone." "He didn't break anything. He's good at his job." "I know, but it's fun to give him a hard time." They walked into the garage together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the rest of the day would bring. Behind them, somewhere across the city in a hospital room, Victoria Hale closed her laptop and stared at her phone and wondered what it meant to have something that felt almost like hope. Victoria was discharged on Sunday afternoon, exactly 36 hours after surgery. Dr. Matthews had wanted to keep her another night, but she'd negotiated her way out with a combination of stubbornness and promises she had no intention of keeping. Home care nurse, daily check-ins, no strenuous activity. She'd agreed to all of it while mentally cataloging the 17 emails that needed responses and the Riverside project review that couldn't wait. Martin picked her up in the company car, a black Mercedes that whispered money and power. The driver held the door while Martin fussed with pillows he'd brought to make the ride more comfortable. Victoria tolerated this because arguing would take more energy than she currently had. The city looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less threatening. Or maybe that was just the pain medication talking. The team put together a care package, Martin said as they pulled away from the hospital. It's waiting at your apartment. Flowers, fruit baskets, some meals from that organic place you like. That's thoughtful. They were worried. We all were. Martin glanced at her. You scared us, Ms. Hale. I scared myself. They drove in silence for a while. Victoria watched the street scroll past. The restaurant where this had all started. The corner where Ethan's van had been parked. The intersection where the ambulance had run a red light with its siren screaming. 48 hours ago, and it already felt like another lifetime. The mechanic, Martin said carefully. Ethan Cole. We looked into him. Victoria's head snapped toward him. You what? Just basic background, public records. We wanted to make sure he was legitimate. You had no right. You're a public figure worth over $2 billion who nearly died and was helped by a complete stranger. We had every right. Martin's voice was firm. But you'll be pleased to know he's exactly what he appears to be. Small business owner, clean record, pays his taxes, raises his daughter. No debt beyond a reasonable mortgage. No criminal history, not even a parking ticket in the last 5 years. Victoria stared out the window, her jaw tight. Did you find anything interesting? His wife died 4 years ago, cerebral aneurysm. He was investigated briefly because she'd had some bruising, but it was ruled natural causes within 48 hours. The investigator's note said he seemed genuinely devastated. He was devastated. He is devastated. Victoria's fingers twisted in her lap. He told me about it, about how she wouldn't go to the hospital because she was afraid. That explains his intervention with you. It wasn't an intervention. It was... Victoria trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. What had it been? A rescue? A moment of grace? Luck? Whatever it was, we owe him, Martin said. The board agrees we'd like to do something significant. A donation to a charity in his name, or maybe fund his daughter's college education. Something meaningful. No. Ms. Hale, I said no. Ethan doesn't want money. He made that very clear. Everyone wants money. Not him. Victoria thought about Ethan's face when Martin had offered compensation. The way he'd shut it down without hesitation. He has something money can't buy. What's that? Integrity, purpose, a reason to get up in the morning that isn't just accumulation. Martin was quiet for a moment. You sound like you admire him. I do. Is that strange? A little. You don't usually admire people. Victoria laughed, short and sharp. No, I suppose I don't. Her penthouse was exactly as she'd left it Friday evening. Pristine, sterile, 2,300 square feet of marble and glass and carefully curated emptiness. The care packages Martin had mentioned were arranged on the kitchen island. Flowers in crystal vases, organic fruit that probably cost more per pound than Ethan spent on groceries in a week. Cards from employees whose names she barely knew. The home care nurse arrived an hour later. Her name was Patricia, late 50s, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd dealt with difficult patients before and would deal with them again. She checked Victoria's incisions, took her vitals, reviewed the medication schedule, and gave her a look that suggested she knew exactly how much of this advice Victoria would actually follow. You're healing well, Patricia said, packing up her bag. But you need to take it easy. No lifting, no exercise, lots of rest. Your body just went through trauma. I understand. Do you? Because in my experience, successful people are the worst patients. They think willpower can override biology. I'll rest. Uh-huh. Patricia headed for the door. I'll be back tomorrow same time. Try not to do anything stupid between now and then. After she left, Victoria stood in the middle of her living room and felt the silence press in from all sides. The view was spectacular, the entire city spread out below like a map she'd conquered. but it felt hollow, empty, like everything she'd built was just an elaborate set piece with nothing behind it. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. Ms. Hale? This is Jennifer Cho from Channel 7 News. I was hoping to get a statement about your hospitalization. Victoria hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different reporter, same question. She sent it to voicemail. Then she turned off her phone entirely and went to bed at 7 p.m. because there was nothing else to do. She woke up at 3 in the morning, disoriented and sore. The apartment was dark except for the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the pain in her abdomen reminded her, and everything came rushing back. Victoria got up carefully and made her way to the kitchen. The pain medication was on the counter where Patricia had left it. She took one pill with a glass of water and stood at the window looking out at the sleeping city. Her phone was still off. She turned it on and immediately regretted it as notifications flooded in. Emails, texts, missed calls. Everyone wanted something. A statement, an interview, an explanation, her approval on something that couldn't possibly wait. Except for one text sent at 11:30 the previous night from Ethan. Hope you got home okay. Lily says hi and wants to know if you've ever actually seen a dolphin. Victoria found herself smiling. She typed back, even though it was 3 in the morning and he was almost certainly asleep. Home safe. Tell Lily I saw dolphins once in Hawaii. They were showing off. She didn't expect a response. But 30 seconds later, her phone buzzed. You're up at 3 a.m. That's either insomnia or workaholism. Maybe both. Can't sleep. Pain meds make me foggy. Welcome to recovery. It sucks. Is this supposed to be encouraging? Just honest. How are you feeling? Victoria looked down at her abdomen, at the bandages hidden beneath her silk pajamas. How was she feeling? Sore? Tired? Weirdly hollow. Like she'd been scooped out and poorly reassembled. Like I went 12 rounds with someone bigger than me, she typed, and lost. That's about right. Give it a few days. It gets better, does it? Yeah, it does, trust me. Victoria sat on the couch, phone in hand, and tried to remember the last time someone had told her to trust them, and actually meant it. The silence stretched. Then her phone buzzed again. You still there? Yes. Sorry, just thinking. Dangerous activity at 3 a.m. When is it not dangerous? Fair point. Want some company? I'm up anyway. Victoria's heart did something strange in her chest. It's 3 in the morning. I'm aware. Lily had a nightmare. I've been up for an hour. Is she okay? Yeah, she gets them sometimes, usually after we visit hospitals or talk about Sarah. Tonight's excitement probably didn't help. Victoria felt a stab of guilt. I'm sorry. Not your fault? She'll be fine, so will you. Question stands, though. Want company? Victoria looked around her pristine apartment, at the designer furniture no one ever sat on, at the art on the walls that she'd bought because her decorator said it was important, at the 23 floors of deliberate isolation she'd built between herself and the rest of humanity. Yes, she typed before she could overthink it. I would like that. Give me your address, I'll be there in 20. She sent it and then spent the next 20 minutes panicking. What was she doing? Inviting a near stranger to her home at 3 in the morning? She barely knew him. Yes, he'd saved her life, but that didn't mean... The buzzer from the lobby interrupted her spiral. Victoria pressed the intercom. It's Ethan. She buzzed him up and spent the elevator ride to the 23rd floor trying to make herself look less like she'd just crawled out of bed. Failed completely. She was still wearing pajamas and her hair was a disaster, and there were probably pillow creases on her face. The doorbell rang. Victoria opened it. Ethan stood in the hallway wearing jeans and the same canvas jacket from Friday night. His hair was messy and he had dark circles under his eyes, but he was smiling. You look terrible, he said. So do you. Yeah, but I have an excuse. I've been up with a 9-year-old who dreamed about sharks eating her dolphin friends. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. Come in. Ethan stepped into the apartment and stopped, taking it all in. The marble floors, the designer furniture, the view that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Wow, he said. This is... wow. It's too much, isn't it? Victoria closed the door, suddenly self-conscious. I didn't say that, just different from my place. I imagine most places are different from your place. Fourth floor walk-up, remember? When the elevator works. They stood in the entryway awkwardly until Victoria gestured toward the living room. Coffee? I shouldn't have any, but I'm making some anyway. Sounds perfect. The kitchen was all stainless steel and marble, designed more for show than actual cooking. Victoria fumbled with the espresso machine, top of the line, rarely used, while Ethan settled on one of the bar stools. How's Lily? She asked. Asleep again. My sister's with her. Rachel doesn't sleep much either, so she didn't mind. The teacher's sister. That's the one. Ethan watched Victoria wrestle with the espresso machine. You know you're supposed to put the coffee in the filter basket, right? I know how to make coffee. Could have fooled me. Victoria glared at him, but there was no heat in it. She got the machine working eventually and produced 2 cups that were probably terrible. Ethan took a sip and didn't quite hide his wince. It's bad, isn't it? Victoria asked. It's strong. That's code for bad. Okay, yeah, it's pretty bad. Ethan grinned. But it's got caffeine and that's what counts. They moved to the living room. Victoria curled up on the couch, careful of her incisions. Ethan took the chair across from her, cradling his terrible coffee like it was something precious. So, he said, 3 a.m. insomnia. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Want to talk about something else? Like what? I don't know. Anything. Everything. How about you tell me about the worst business deal you ever made? Victoria blinked. Why would you want to know that? Because everyone's always asking about your successes, the billion-dollar projects, the empire you built. Nobody asks about the failures. There's a reason for that. Yeah, but the failures are usually more interesting. Ethan leaned back. Come on. Worst deal. I'll trade you. I'll tell you about the time I rebuilt an engine that blew up 3 days later. It blew up? Spectacularly. Turns out I'd missed a hairline crack in the block. Cost me $5,000 and my reputation for about 6 months. Victoria sipped her coffee, considering. There was a property in Boston 8 years ago. Mixed-use development, gorgeous location, perfect opportunity. Or so I thought. What went wrong? Everything. The permits got held up for 18 months. The contractor I hired turned out to be embezzling funds. The anchor tenant pulled out a week before we broke ground. And the whole time I kept throwing money at it because I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake. How much did you lose? 40 million. Give or take. Ethan whistled low. That's a lot of give or take. It was a disaster. My board wanted me to resign. The press had a field day. I spent 6 months sure I was going to lose everything. But you didn't. No, I learned from it. Got smarter about due diligence, stopped trusting people just because they had impressive credentials, built better systems, turned a failure into a lesson. Something like that. Victoria set down her coffee cup. Why did you want to know? Because perfect people are boring and kind of insufferable. Ethan smiled. But people who failed and kept going anyway? Those are the interesting ones. They talked until the sun started to rise, painting the city in shades of orange and pink. About failures and successes, about Sarah and Victoria's mother, about Lily's dreams of marine biology and Victoria's dreams of… what? She'd been chasing success for so long she'd forgotten to have dreams. What do you actually want? Ethan asked as dawn broke fully across the skyline. Not what you're supposed to want, not what looks good in a business magazine. What do you want? Victoria was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. I've spent so long building walls and making money and proving I don't need anyone that I forgot to figure out what I actually need. So figure it out now. It's not that simple. Isn't it? You almost died, Victoria. You got a second chance. What are you going to do with it? I don't know, she repeated, but this time it sounded less like defeat and more like possibility. Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked it and stood up. I should go. Lily will be up soon and she'll want breakfast. Pancakes on Sunday mornings. It's a tradition. The ones her mother used to make? I'm trying. They're not as good, but Lily's too polite to say so. He headed for the door, then paused. You should come next Sunday, if you want. To your apartment? Yeah, fair warning. It's nothing like this. The floors squeak and the paint's peeling, and Lily will probably interrogate you about dolphins for an hour. But the pancakes are decent, and the company's good. Victoria felt something warm unfurl in her chest. I'd like that. Okay then. Next Sunday, 10 a.m. Ethan opened the door. And Victoria? Get some actual sleep. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. No, but I play one at 3 a.m. apparently. He left. Victoria stood in her empty apartment as the sun climbed higher over the city and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Like maybe, possibly, she wasn't quite as alone as she'd thought. The week that followed was harder than Victoria had anticipated. Not the physical recovery. That was progressing fine, according to Patricia's daily visits. The incisions were healing. The pain was manageable. Her body was doing what bodies do when given time and rest. No, the hard part was the rest itself. The sitting still. The not working. The long hours with nothing to do except think. She tried. She really did. She followed Patricia's instructions, took her medications, stayed off her feet. But by Tuesday, she was answering emails. By Wednesday, she was on conference calls. By Thursday, Martin had stopped by with files and found her at her dining room table, laptop open, completely absorbed in the Riverside Project review. You're supposed to be resting, he said. I am resting. I'm sitting down, aren't I? That's not what the doctor meant, and you know it. The doctor also said I'd be back to normal in 2 weeks. I'm accelerating the timeline. Martin sat down across from her, his expression serious. Ms. Hale. Victoria. You nearly died. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Of course it means something. Then act like it. Take the time. Heal. The company will survive without you for a few more days. But Victoria didn't know how to do that. Didn't know how to exist without the work, without the constant motion forward. Stopping meant thinking, thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant confronting all the things she'd spent 30 years running from. So she worked. And when she couldn't work anymore, when her body literally forced her to stop, she texted Ethan. They fell into a pattern. Late-night conversations when neither of them could sleep. Sometimes about serious things, loss and fear and the weight of moving forward. Sometimes about nothing. Bad movies, worse coffee, Lily's increasingly elaborate theories about dolphin communication. On Friday, Ethan sent her a photo. Lily, at the aquarium, pressed against the glass of the dolphin tank, her face lit up with pure joy. She says they remember her, the text read. I don't have the heart to tell her they probably don't. Maybe they do, Victoria typed back. Dolphins are smart. Not that smart. Don't crush her dreams. Let her have this one. There was a pause. Then, you're right, thanks. Victoria stared at the photo for a long time, at Lily's happiness, at the simple, uncomplicated joy of a child who still believed in magic and memory and the goodness of the world. When had Victoria stopped believing in those things? When had cynicism become her default setting? On Saturday, she made a decision. I want to do something, she told Martin when he called to check in. For Ethan, for his garage. We've tried that. He doesn't want money. Not money. Something else. Something useful. Victoria pulled up the research she'd been doing all morning. His lease is up for renewal in 6 months. The building owner is planning to triple the rent because the neighborhood's gentrifying. How do you know that? I made some calls, called in some favors. Victoria clicked through the documents on her screen. If he can't afford the new rent, he'll have to relocate or close. So what are you proposing? I'm proposing we buy the building. Martin was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Hale, not the company, me, personally. I buy the building, I keep the rent reasonable, Ethan keeps his garage. Everyone wins. Except you. That building's in a marginal neighborhood, not exactly a sound investment. I don't care about the investment. Victoria stood up, pacing despite Patricia's warnings. I care about making sure that a good man who helps people doesn't get crushed by gentrification because he chose to save my life instead of finishing a transmission rebuild. This is about guilt. This is about doing something right. Victoria stopped at the window, looking out at the city. I've spent my entire career buying things and making them more expensive, more exclusive, more inaccessible to regular people. Just once, I want to buy something and make it better in a way that actually matters. Martin sighed. I'll set up the purchase. But you're telling him yourself. He's not going to like it. I know. I'm counting on that. Sunday morning came too fast. Victoria woke up at 8, panicked about what to wear. What did one wear to pancake breakfast in a fourth-floor walk-up? Everything in her closet screamed money and power, designer labels and silk and carefully calculated intimidation. She settled on jeans, the only pair she owned, bought 3 years ago and never worn, and a cashmere sweater that was technically casual but probably still cost more than Ethan's monthly mortgage. It would have to do. The neighborhood was different in daylight. Victoria had looked it up on the map, but seeing it in person was something else. Narrow streets lined with old brick buildings, bodegas and laundromats and small restaurants with handwritten specials in the windows. The kind of neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors' names. Ethan's building was sandwiched between a Vietnamese restaurant and a place that sold used books. The door to the residential entrance was propped open with a brick. Victoria climbed the stairs, the elevator was indeed broken, and arrived on the 4th floor slightly out of breath and wondering what the hell she was doing. Apartment 4C. She knocked. Footsteps, then the door swung open. Lily stood there in pajamas covered in dolphins, her hair in a messy braid, grinning from ear to ear. "You came," she said. "Dad said you might not because you're probably busy, but I said you'd come because you promised. And, Dad, Victoria's here." "I can see that, Lil." Ethan appeared behind his daughter, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. "Come in. Sorry about the mess." The apartment was small but warm, lived in. Nothing matched, but everything fit together anyway. Photos on the walls, books stacked on every surface. A cat that Victoria assumed was the infamous spark plug curled up on the couch. It felt like a home. "Pancakes are almost ready," Ethan said, leading her to the kitchen. "Hope you like them plain. Lily insists chocolate chips are sacrilege." "Mom made them plain," Lily said seriously. "So that's the right way." The kitchen was tiny, barely room for the 3 of them. But somehow they made it work. Ethan at the stove, Lily setting the table, Victoria trying to help, and mostly getting in the way. The pancakes were lumpy and slightly burned and absolutely perfect. They ate at a table that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under one leg. They talked about dolphins and school and whether cats understood when you talked to them. Lily insisted they did. Ethan remained skeptical. Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in months. After breakfast, Lily dragged Victoria to her room to show her the dolphin poster collection. Ethan did the dishes and pretended not to notice when Victoria slipped him a look that said, "Help me." "This one's a bottlenose," Lily explained, pointing to a poster above her bed. "And this one's a spinner dolphin. They can jump like 15 feet in the air." 15 feet. That's almost as tall as this building. That's impressive, right? Lily moved to the next poster. "And this one's a pink dolphin from the Amazon. They're endangered, which is super sad, but some people are trying to save them." "That's good." "Yeah." Lily sat down on her bed, her expression turning serious. "Dad says you're really rich, like, buy anything you want rich." Victoria tensed. "I have money, yes." "Could you buy enough stuff to save the pink dolphins?" I don't know. Maybe. Conservation is complicated. But you could try, right? If you wanted to?" Victoria looked at this child with her earnest eyes and her absolute faith that the world could be fixed if people just tried hard enough. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I could try." Lily beamed. "Cool. I'm going to research it and send you information. Dad says always have information before you ask for things." "Your dad is very wise." "Sometimes. Other times he puts his keys in the fridge." Victoria laughed. Lily laughed with her. And for a moment everything felt easy and light and possible. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable chaos. Lily taught Victoria a card game that made no sense but was apparently very important. Ethan made more coffee, better than Victoria's attempt, but still not great. Sparkplug the cat decided Victoria's lap was the perfect napping spot and refused to move. Around noon, Lily's friend called about a school project and she disappeared into her room with the phone. Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch, the cat purring between them. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said. "It means a lot to Lily, to both of us." "Thank you for inviting me. I can't remember the last time I had pancakes for breakfast." "What do you usually have?" "Green juice or nothing. Depends on how many meetings I have." Ethan shook his head. "That's depressing." "That's efficiency." Still depressing. They sat in companionable silence. Through the wall, they could hear Lily's animated conversation about a science project involving ocean currents. "I bought your building," Victoria said suddenly. Ethan turned to stare at her. "What?" "Your garage, the building it's in. I bought it on Friday." "You... what? Why?" "Because your lease is up in 6 months and the owner was planning to triple your rent and I couldn't..." Victoria stopped, took a breath. "I couldn't let you lose your business because you helped me." Ethan's expression was complicated. "Victoria, the rent stays the same. Actually, it goes down slightly because the previous owner was overcharging. You keep your garage, your employees keep their jobs, and I feel slightly less guilty about upending your entire life last Friday. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's a sound investment in a gentrifying neighborhood." "Bullshit. Martin told you it was a marginal investment." "You talked to Martin? He called me yesterday to give me a heads up. Said you were planning something and I should probably be prepared." Victoria silently vowed to kill Martin. "Fine. It's not a great investment financially, but it's a good investment in other ways." "Like what?" "Like keeping a good man in business. Like making sure Lily doesn't have to move because her dad can't afford the new rent. Like doing one thing in my life that actually helps someone instead of just making me richer." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You can't just buy buildings every time you feel guilty." "Watch me." "Victoria?" "I'm not taking it back. The paperwork's done. You can pay me rent at the current rate or I'll lower it further. Your choice. But you're not getting kicked out of your garage because the neighborhood got trendy." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly, he laughed. "You're something else, you know that? I've been told. Sarah would have liked you. She had the same kind of terrifying competence." Victoria felt her chest tighten. "I'm not competent. I'm a mess who almost died from stubbornness." "Yeah, but you're trying. That counts for something." From Lily's room came a shriek of laughter. Sparkplug stirred, annoyed at the noise, then settled back down. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. "I don't know how to do this," Victoria said quietly. "Be a person instead of just a business machine. Let people in. Trust that they won't leave. Nobody knows how to do it. We're all just making it up as we go." "That's not reassuring." "It's true, though." Ethan shifted to face her. "You want to know what I think?" "Probably not, but tell me anyway." "I think you're scared that if you stop moving, stop building, stop accumulating, you'll have to face the fact that you've been running from a 7-year-old girl who lost her mother. And that 7-year-old is still inside you somewhere, still scared, still waiting for someone to tell her it's going to be okay." Victoria's eyes burned. That's not fair." "No, but it's true." She looked away, blinking hard. "I don't know how to make it okay." "You start by showing up, like you did today. You keep showing up until it gets easier, until the scared part gets a little smaller and the brave part gets a little bigger." Ethan's voice was gentle. "You don't have to do it alone, Victoria. That's the whole point." Victoria wiped her eyes, frustrated at the tears. "I'm not good at this. Nobody is at first, but you'll learn. You're smart enough." "Being smart has nothing to do with it." "No, but caring does. And I think you care more than you let yourself admit." Lily emerged from her room, stopping short when she saw Victoria's face. "Are you crying? Did Dad make you cry?" "Dad, you're not supposed to make guests cry." "I'm fine," Victoria said quickly. "Just allergies." "To what? Sparkplug?" Lily looked horrified. "Do you need an antihistamine? We have some in the bathroom." "I don't need anything. I'm fine. Really." But Lily was already digging through the bathroom cabinet, returning with allergy medicine and a glass of water like a tiny medic on a mission. Victoria took the pill to make her happy, even though she had no allergies and her eyes were burning for entirely different reasons. "Thank you, Lily." "You're welcome. We take care of our friends in this house." Lily said it with the absolute certainty of a child who'd been taught that caring for people was just what you did. No questions, no conditions. Victoria looked at Ethan over his daughter's head. He shrugged, smiling. What she said. And Victoria, who'd spent 30 years convinced she didn't need anyone, who'd built an empire on being self-sufficient and untouchable, felt something crack open in her chest. something that hurt and healed at the same time. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, what?" Lily asked. "Okay, I'll be your friend." Lily's face lit up. "Really? That's awesome, because I have so many questions about real estate and also about being rich. And also, do you think you could help save the pink dolphins? Because I really think—" "Lily, breathe," Ethan said, laughing. But Victoria was laughing too. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, the laughter didn't feel forced or performative. It felt real. It felt like coming home. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the conference room of Memorial General Hospital and felt her palms sweat, which was ridiculous. She'd presented to boards worth billions, negotiated with city councils, stared down investors who wanted her to fail. A room full of hospital administrators shouldn't make her nervous. But this wasn't just any hospital. This was the place where her mother had died, where she'd almost died, where everything had changed. Ms. Hale, the hospital's CEO, a woman named Dr. Sandra Chen, gestured to the presentation screen. "Whenever you're ready." Victoria took a breath and clicked to the first slide. The room fell quiet. "Thank you for meeting with me today," she started, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm here to propose the establishment of a new emergency care center to be built as an extension of Memorial General's existing facilities." She clicked through the slides. Architectural renderings, budget projections, staffing plans. Everything she'd spent the last 3 months putting together with her team and a healthcare consulting firm that specialized in emergency medicine. "The center will be specifically designed to reduce patient anxiety," Victoria continued. "Private triage rooms instead of curtain bays, natural lighting, family waiting areas adjacent to treatment spaces. Evidence-based design that's been shown to improve patient outcomes and reduce the psychological trauma associated with emergency care." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "This is impressive work, Ms. Hale, but I have to ask, why Memorial General? You could put this kind of facility anywhere." Victoria had known this question was coming. She'd prepared an answer about community need and strategic location, but standing here in this building, the prepared answer felt hollow. "Because my mother died here 27 years ago," she said instead. "Because 3 months ago I almost died here too. And because both of those things happened, at least in part, because we were too afraid to ask for help when we needed it." The room was very quiet. "I can't change what happened to my mother," Victoria continued, "but I can try to make sure that other people, other scared kids, other terrified patients, don't have to face their worst moments in a place that makes those moments even harder." She clicked to the next slide, a dedication page. "I'd like to name it the Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center, after my mother." Victoria's throat tightened, but she pushed through. She deserved better than what she got. This won't bring her back, but maybe it'll help someone else's mother come home. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "When can we break ground?" The meeting ran another hour, hammering out details and timelines. Victoria signed the preliminary commitment, $25 million, the largest single donation Memorial General had ever received. Martin would probably have a heart attack when he saw the check. She'd deal with that later. When she finally walked out of the hospital into the bright April afternoon, Ethan was waiting by his van. He'd parked illegally again, hazards blinking. Some things never changed. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They said yes." "Of course they did. You're offering them $25 million. It's not about the money." "I know." Ethan smiled. "How do you feel?" Victoria considered the question. 3 months ago, she would have deflected, changed the subject, built a wall between the question and any real answer. Now she actually stopped to think about it. "Terrified," she admitted. "Relieved. Like I just did something that can't be undone." "That's because you did. That's kind of the point." They walked to where Ethan had parked. A meter maid was eyeing the van speculatively. Ethan waved and she rolled her eyes but moved on. "Lily wanted to come, but she had a science presentation today," Ethan said. "Something about ocean acidification and coral reefs. She's been practicing for weeks. I'm sorry I missed it. There'll be more. Kids got presentations the way some people have hobbies." Ethan leaned against the van. "So, Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center. That's a hell of a legacy. She deserves to be remembered as more than just someone who died badly." "Yeah, she does." Victoria looked up at the hospital building, at the windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Somewhere up on the fourth floor was room 412, where she'd woken up after surgery convinced she was going to die. Where Ethan had sat with her through the worst of the fear. Where Lily had hugged her and told her hospitals were just buildings. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said. "About the garage." Ethan's expression shifted. "What about it?" "I'm not just keeping the rent low, I'm investing, expanding. I want to turn the other units in the building into a full automotive center. More bays, better equipment, room for you to hire more people." "Victoria, let me finish. I've been watching you work these last 3 months. The way you run that place, the way you care about your customers, the community you've built. It's special, it's rare, and it shouldn't be limited by square footage and outdated equipment. You've been researching auto equipment? I've been researching a lot of things. Turns out when you stop working 80-hour weeks, you have time to learn about things that actually matter." Ethan was quiet, his expression unreadable. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You keep running the garage however you want. I'm just the landlord who happens to think your business model is solid and worth expanding." "Business model. I have customers who pay me in tamales. And they trust you with their cars, which means they trust you with their ability to get to work, to take their kids to school, to live their lives. That's valuable. That's worth investing in." Ethan studied her face. "This isn't just about the garage, is it?" "No," Victoria admitted. "It's about doing something that actually helps people, real people, not just other rich people trying to get richer. It's about using what I have to make something better instead of just making something more expensive." "When did you become an idealist?" "I'm not an idealist. I'm a realist who almost died and realized all the money in the world doesn't mean anything if you're too scared to actually live." Ethan smiled. "Fair enough. Okay, let's do it." "Really?" "Really. But I have conditions." "Of course you do." "Marcus gets promoted. He's been doing this work of 2 people and getting paid for 1. And we hire locally when we expand. People from the neighborhood who need the work." Victoria pulled out her phone and started making notes. "Done. What else?" "Lily gets to name the new cat adoption program." Victoria looked up. "What cat adoption program?" "The one where we partner with the animal shelter and keep adoptable cats in the waiting area. Lily's been bugging me about it for months. Says people waiting for their cars need something to do besides read old magazines. That's actually brilliant." "I know. Kid's a genius." Ethan pushed off the van. "I need to get back to the garage. Marcus is handling a transmission rebuild, and he's going to need help. You want to come?" "To watch you fix a transmission? To see what you're investing in?" Victoria glanced at her watch. She had 3 conference calls this afternoon, a dinner with potential investors, 100 emails that needed responses. The old Victoria would have said no, would have climbed into her town car, and gone back to her office to work until midnight. The new Victoria, the one who was still figuring out how to actually live instead of just survive, said yes. The garage was exactly as chaotic as she remembered. The smell of motor oil and old coffee. The sound of pneumatic tools, and Marcus swearing creatively at an engine that wasn't cooperating. A customer waiting in the small office, scrolling through their phone. "Ms. Hale!" Marcus looked up from the transmission, surprise crossing his face. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I'm expanding my investment portfolio," Victoria said dryly. "Thought I should see what I'm buying." "Oh, well, you're buying a transmission that's fighting me every step of the way, and a boss who can't throw anything out, even when it's clearly garbage." "That toolbox is vintage," Ethan protested, "and it still works. It's held together with duct tape and prayer. Like I said, still works." Victoria found herself smiling. This was so different from her world of glass towers and polished boardrooms. But it was real. It mattered. These people mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Dad says you're at the garage. Can you stay until I get there? I have big news about the dolphins." Victoria typed back, "I'll stay. Can't wait to hear the news." She put her phone away and settled into the corner office chair that squeaked and probably had springs older than she was. Through the window, she could see Ethan and Marcus working on the transmission, their movements synchronized from years of working together. This was what she'd been missing. Not just the work, but the partnership, the collaboration, the sense of being part of something bigger than just her own success. Lily arrived 45 minutes later, bursting through the garage door with enough energy to power the building. Victoria, guess what? What? My science teacher submitted my coral reef project to a state competition, and I made it to the finals. And if I win, I get a scholarship to marine biology camp this summer. Lily, that's amazing. I know. And Dad said if I win, he'll take me to the aquarium every weekend for a month. But I said that's too much, so we compromised on twice a month. Lily bounced on her toes. Also, I finished my research on pink dolphins, and I have a whole presentation for you about conservation efforts in the Amazon. I can't wait to see it. Really? Because it's like 40 slides and Dad says that's too many, but I think it's exactly the right amount. Victoria laughed. 40 slides is perfect. When do you want to present? Now? Lily, Victoria probably has other things to do, Ethan called from under the car. Actually, Victoria said, I don't. My afternoon just cleared up. That was a lie. Her afternoon was packed. But watching Lily's face light up made it worth every angry email she'd get from Martin about missing meetings. They sat in the garage office while Lily pulled up her presentation on Ethan's ancient laptop. The slides were elaborate, full of facts and photos and carefully researched conservation strategies. Lily narrated with the passion of someone who'd found their calling at age 9. And this organization, Lily pointed to the screen, they're doing really important work, but they need funding. I looked into it and they're legit. Dad taught me to always check if charities are legit before you donate. Your dad is very smart. I know. So anyway, I was thinking, Lily paused, suddenly looking nervous. I was thinking maybe you could help them. Not like all the money they need, but some, if you wanted. I know you're already doing the hospital thing, but I thought maybe… Send me the information, Victoria interrupted gently. I'll look into it. Really? Really? But Lily, you should know, I can't save every dolphin in the world. I can help, but I can't fix everything. I know. Dad says that too. He says you can only fix what's in front of you and hope it makes a difference. Lily closed the laptop. But you fixed the hospital thing and the garage thing, so maybe you can help with the dolphin thing too. Victoria looked at this child who saw the world as a series of problems that could be solved with enough effort and care. When had she lost that? When had she started seeing the world as something to conquer instead of something to help? Okay, she said, let's help the dolphins. Lily threw her arms around Victoria in a hug that knocked the breath out of her. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to tell Dad. She ran off to where Ethan was still working. Victoria could hear her excited chatter, could see Ethan smile as he listened to his daughter's enthusiasm. Her phone buzzed again. Martin, asking where she was, reminding her about the investor dinner, mentioning that the Riverside project needed her approval on something. Victoria looked at the message. Then she looked at Ethan and Lily and Marcus, at this garage that smelled like oil and coffee and hard work, at this life that was so different from everything she'd built. She typed back, "Handle it, I'm busy." Martin's response was immediate. "Busy with what?" "Living," she wrote. "For once, I'm actually living." The investor dinner could wait. The Riverside project could wait. Everything could wait. Because for the first time in 30 years, Victoria Hale was exactly where she wanted to be. The months that followed weren't easy. Change never was. Victoria had to learn how to delegate, how to trust her team to handle things without her constant oversight. She had to resist the urge to work through weekends, to answer emails at 3 a.m., to treat every project like life or death. She failed at it more often than she succeeded, but she kept trying. The garage expansion broke ground in June. Victoria showed up for the groundbreaking in jeans and work boots, much to Martin's horror. She stood next to Ethan as the construction crew started tearing out walls, as the vision she'd had on paper started becoming real. "You know this is going to be chaos for months," Ethan said, watching the workers. "I know, Marcus already complained about the noise." "He'll complain about everything. It's his love language." Victoria smiled. "How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified, excited, like I'm about to lose control of everything I've built." "Welcome to my world." "Yeah, but you're good at this." "I fix cars. I don't run empires." "You run a community. That's harder than running an empire." Victoria watched a worker measure out the new bay dimensions. Empires are just money and power. Community is trust and connection. You can't buy that. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just finally paying attention. The Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center broke ground in August. Victoria insisted on being there, even though standing in the summer heat made her incisions ache in phantom memory. The hospital had invited press, local officials, everyone who mattered in city healthcare. Victoria stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd, at Dr. Chen and the hospital board, at Martin and her executive team, at Ethan and Lily in the front row, Lily holding a sign she'd made that said, "Saving lives is cool." 27 years ago, Victoria began, I lost my mother in this hospital. It wasn't anyone's fault. Complications happen. But what stayed with me wasn't just the loss. It was the fear. The sterile hallways, the harsh lights, the sense that we were all just numbers in a system too big to care about individual people. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 3 months ago, I almost became another statistic. I was so afraid of hospitals, so traumatized by what happened to my mother, that I was willing to die rather than ask for help. If it hadn't been for a stranger who refused to let fear win, she looked at Ethan, I wouldn't be standing here today. The crowd was silent, attentive. This center isn't about erasing the past. We can't bring back the people we've lost. But we can try to make sure that fear doesn't cost anyone else their life. That hospitals can be places of healing instead of trauma. That asking for help doesn't have to feel like surrender. She clicked to the architectural rendering on the screen behind her. The Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center will serve this community with the kind of compassionate, thoughtful care that my mother deserved, that every patient deserves. And it will stand as a reminder that it's never too late to turn pain into purpose. The applause was thunderous. Victoria stepped away from the podium, her hands shaking slightly. Dr. Chen gave her a hug. Martin looked proud. And Lily was bouncing in her seat, still holding her sign. Afterward, when the officials had left and the press had packed up their cameras, Victoria stood at the construction site and looked at the empty lot that would soon be a building. That would soon be a legacy. Your mom would be proud, Ethan said quietly, appearing beside her. You think so? I know so. You're doing what she couldn't. You're making sure her story means something. Victoria's eyes burned, but she didn't look away from the construction site. I spent so long running from her memory, from the pain of losing her. I convinced myself that if I never needed anyone, if I never let anyone in, I'd never hurt like that again. Did it work? No, I was just alone instead of alive. She turned to face him. You changed that, you and Lily. You showed me what I was missing. We just showed up. You did the hard part. The hard part is still ongoing, Victoria smiled. I'm terrible at it, by the way. At being vulnerable, at letting people matter. Nobody's good at it. We all just fake it until it becomes real. They stood together in the August heat, watching the construction crew pack up for the day. Lily had wandered over to inspect the site markers, making up stories about what would go where. She wants to be an architect now, Ethan said, watching his daughter. Last week it was marine biology. This week it's architecture. Next week it'll probably be something else entirely. She's got time to figure it out. Yeah, she does. Ethan glanced at Victoria. What about you? What's next? I don't know. That's a first for me, not having a 5-year plan mapped out in obsessive detail. How does it feel? Terrifying. Liberating. Both at once. Sounds about right. Victoria's phone buzzed. For once, she ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. This moment, standing in the heat with Ethan, watching Lily explore, seeing the beginning of something that would outlast all of them, this mattered more than any email or deal or project. I'm setting up a foundation, she said suddenly, for conservation work, marine biology research, ocean protection, all the things Lily keeps sending me 40-slide presentations about. Ethan laughed. She's going to lose her mind. I'm counting on it. I need a board member who's passionate about the mission, someone young and enthusiastic and not yet cynical about what's possible. You're going to put a 9-year-old on your foundation board? When she's older, but yes, if she wants it, Victoria smiled. She's going to change the world, Ethan. She already changed mine. They collected Lily and headed to an early dinner at the Vietnamese place near Ethan's apartment. They squeezed into a booth meant for two, ordered too much food, and talked about everything and nothing. Lily dominated the conversation with theories about underwater architecture and whether dolphins would make good building inspectors. It was ordinary. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of moment Victoria had spent her entire adult life avoiding because ordinary felt like failure. But now ordinary felt like the whole point. September brought the start of school and the completion of the garage expansion. The grand reopening was a neighborhood affair. Local businesses bringing food, families with kids running around, Marcus giving impromptu tours of the new equipment. Victoria stood with Ethan as they cut the ribbon, cameras flashing. The sign above the door read Cole Automotive in fresh letters, and beneath it, smaller, a community garage. A community garage, Ethan read aloud. That wasn't my idea. It was Lily's. She said it should be clear what you're about. Victoria smiled. I agreed. The crowd cheered as they cut the ribbon. Marcus immediately grabbed a microphone and started explaining the new hydraulic lifts to anyone who would listen. Lily had set up an information table about the cat adoption program, complete with 3 very sleepy kittens who were supposed to be promoting the cause but were mostly just napping. Mrs. Chen from the 3rd floor brought enough dumplings to feed the entire block. The customer who'd paid in tamales brought tamales. Someone set up a speaker and music started playing, classic rock that had Ethan shaking his head but smiling anyway. Victoria found herself pulled into conversations with neighbors she'd never met, people who'd known Ethan for years and wanted to thank her for helping expand the garage. They treated her like she belonged there, like she was part of the community instead of a billionaire slumming it in a rough neighborhood. It felt good. It felt real. Around sunset, when the crowd had thinned and the cleanup was underway, Victoria and Ethan sat on the curb outside the garage. Lily was helping Marcus pack up the kittens, who were protesting loudly about being disturbed. Thank you, Ethan said, for all of this, for believing it was worth investing in. Thank you for showing me what's actually worth investing in. Victoria leaned back, looking up at the darkening sky. I spent my whole life building things I didn't care about for people I didn't know. This is the first time I've built something that actually matters. It matters to a lot of people. You saw the turnout today. I did. It's overwhelming. In a good way? In the best way. They sat in comfortable silence as the neighborhood settled into evening. Somewhere down the street, someone was cooking dinner. Kids were being called inside. The city breathed around them, alive and messy and beautiful. I'm going back to therapy, Victoria said abruptly. Ethan looked at her. Yeah? Yeah. Turns out buying buildings and funding emergency care centers doesn't actually resolve childhood trauma. Who knew? Shocking development. I found someone who specializes in grief and loss. First appointment is next week. I'm terrified. That probably means it's the right thing. That's what Lily said, Ethan smiled, kids wise beyond her years. She gets it from her dad. She gets it from her mom, too. Sarah was the one who taught her to be brave, to try things even when they're scary. His voice went soft. I miss her every day, but I'm grateful for what she left behind. Victoria reached over and took his hand. Not romantic, just connection. Just 2 people who understood loss sitting together in the gathering dark. I'm glad you didn't let me die in the rain that night, she said quietly. I'm glad you let me help you. I didn't really have a choice. Yeah, you did. You could have fought harder, could have refused to get in the ambulance, could have done a dozen things differently. Ethan squeezed her hand. But you chose to trust a stranger. That took more courage than you realize. Victoria thought about that night, about the pain and the fear and the absolute certainty that hospitals meant death. About Ethan's voice cutting through the panic, his hand holding hers, his refusal to let her give up. You gave me my life back, she said. I'm still figuring out what to do with it, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do. They sat there until Lily finished with the kittens and came to join them, squeezing between them on the curb. She smelled like catnip and enthusiasm. This was the best day ever, she announced. Even better than the aquarium. High praise, Ethan said. I mean it. Everyone was so happy. And Marcus said I can name all the kittens in the adoption program. All of them. I'm going to call them after famous marine biologists. Of course you are. I already have a list. Jacques Cousteau for the orange one, Sylvia Earle for the calico, and Lil, maybe save some names for future kittens. There are going to be so many kittens, though. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine. This child with her endless energy and bigger dreams. This man with his quiet strength and open heart. This life that was nothing like what she'd planned, but somehow exactly what she needed. 6 months ago, she'd been dying in the rain, too afraid to save herself. Now she was sitting on a curb with people who'd become family, building something that mattered, finally figuring out how to live instead of just survive. The emergency care center opened in November, 3 months ahead of schedule. The dedication ceremony was smaller than the groundbreaking, more intimate. Just hospital staff, a few key donors, and the people Victoria had specifically invited. Ethan and Lily were in the front row again. Marcus had come too, uncomfortable in a button-down shirt, but there to support his boss's weird friendship with the billionaire lady. Martin and the executive team. Rachel, Ethan's sister, who'd wanted to meet the woman her brother kept talking about. Dr. Chen spoke first, thanking Victoria and outlining the center's mission. Then Victoria stood at the podium, looking out at the small crowd, and felt her mother's presence like a weight and a blessing. "My mother's name was Eleanor," she began. She liked crossword puzzles and bad coffee and watching old movies on Sunday afternoons. She worked as a secretary at a law firm. She raised me alone after my father died. She was terrified of hospitals because her own mother had died in one when she was young. Victoria paused, her voice catching. When she needed surgery, she delayed for weeks because of that fear. When she finally came here, complications arose. She didn't make it. And I spent the next 27 years convinced that hospitals were places where people went to die, that asking for help was weakness, that needing anyone made you vulnerable to unbearable loss. She looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. But 3 months ago, I learned that the real weakness is letting fear win, that asking for help is the bravest thing you can do, that vulnerability isn't something to avoid, it's the price of admission for actually living. Victoria gestured to the building behind her, the beautiful new addition to Memorial General with its warm lighting and thoughtful design. "This center is named for my mother, but it's built for everyone who's ever been too scared to ask for help, for everyone who's ever let fear cost them something precious, for everyone who needs a second chance." She pressed the button that unveiled the bronze plaque beside the entrance. Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center. And beneath her mother's name, a quote Victoria had chosen carefully. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward anyway." The small crowd applauded. Dr. Chen gave a tour of the facility, the private treatment rooms, the family consultation spaces, the natural light streaming through carefully positioned windows. Everything designed to reduce trauma, to make asking for help a little less terrifying. Afterward, Victoria stood in the main waiting area and watched staff prepare for the center's first day of operations. In a few hours, people would start coming through those doors. Scared people, hurting people, people who needed help and were finally ready to ask for it. "Mom would have hated having her name on a hospital," Victoria said quietly to Ethan, who'd come to stand beside her. "Probably, but she'd have loved that it helps people." "You think?" "I know. Parents want their kids to be happy, to do good things, to make the world a little better." Ethan smiled. "You're doing all of that. She'd be proud." Victoria blinked back tears. "I'm not usually this emotional." "Yes, you are. You've just spent 30 years pretending not to be." "Fair point." Lily appeared, having finished her exploration of the building. "This place is amazing. The kids' area has an aquarium with real fish. Can we donate some dolphins?" "Dolphins don't do well in small tanks, Lil," Ethan said. "Oh, right. What about seahorses?" "We can look into seahorses." They left the hospital together, this odd little family that Victoria had somehow acquired. Ethan and Lily and Marcus piled into the van, the same battered van from that rainy night in October. Victoria had her town car waiting, but she waved it off and climbed into the van instead, squeezing into the back seat with Lily. "Where to?" Ethan asked. "Surprise me," Victoria said. They ended up at the aquarium. Of course they did. Lily had been angling for another visit for weeks, and this seemed like as good a time as any. They spent 2 hours watching dolphins perform, learning about ocean conservation, listening to Lily explain marine biology to anyone who would listen. Victoria stood at the dolphin tank, watching these intelligent creatures move through the water with such grace and purpose. Lily pressed against the glass beside her, her face lit up with pure joy. "They're so smart," Lily said for the 100th time. And they help each other. When one dolphin is sick or hurt, the others lift it to the surface so it can breathe. They don't leave anyone behind. Victoria thought about that, about lifting each other to the surface, about not leaving anyone behind. That's what communities do, she said. That's what we're supposed to do for each other. Exactly, Lily beamed. That's why I want to study them, to learn how they do it so we can do it better. I think you're already learning. They stayed until closing, until the staff gently herded them toward the exit. Ethan drove them all to dinner at a diner that served breakfast all day. They ordered pancakes even though it was 7 p.m. and debated whether dolphins or orcas were superior marine mammals. Marcus argued for sharks. Lily was scandalized. It was loud and messy and chaotic. Victoria's phone rang 6 times, and she ignored it every time. Martin would have an aneurysm, but she didn't care. This was life. This was what mattered. Christmas came with unexpected snow, turning the city into something almost magical. Victoria spent Christmas Eve at Ethan's apartment, helping Lily make cookies that were more frosting than cookie. They watched old movies and drank hot chocolate, and Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Home. Like she belonged. I have something for you, she told Lily when the cookies were done and the movies were over. A present? But it's not Christmas yet. Close enough. Victoria pulled out an envelope. It's not a thing. It's more of a promise. Lily opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, written in Victoria's precise handwriting. Dear Lily, she read aloud, by the time you read this, you'll probably have changed your career goals 15 more times. Marine biologist, architect, dolphin trainer, whatever you decide to be. But no matter what path you choose, I want you to know that your education is secured. I've set up a scholarship fund in your name that will cover undergraduate and graduate school, anywhere you want to go, for whatever you want to study. Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at Victoria, then at Ethan, then back at the letter. But there's a condition, the letter continued. You have to promise to use what you learn to help others, to make the world better in whatever small way you can, to not leave anyone behind, just like the dolphins taught you. Do we have a deal? Lily's eyes filled with tears. She launched herself at Victoria, hugging her so hard it knocked the breath out of both of them. Deal, Lily whispered. Deal, deal, deal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Victoria held her tight, this child who'd shown her what it meant to believe in possibility, who'd hugged her in a hospital room and told her buildings couldn't hurt you, who taught her that being brave meant showing up even when you were scared. Over Lily's head, Victoria met Ethan's eyes. He was smiling, but his own eyes were wet. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did. She's going to change the world. I want to make sure nothing stops her. Nothing's going to stop her anyway. She's too stubborn. Wonder where she gets that. Ethan laughed. Fair point. They stayed up late, the 3 of them, talking about the future, about Lily's plans to save the oceans, about the garage's expansion into motorcycle repair, about the emergency care center's first successful month, about everything and nothing. Around midnight, Lily finally fell asleep on the couch, curled up with Sparkplug. Ethan carried her to bed and came back to find Victoria standing at the window, looking out at the snowy city. Thank you, he said, for everything, for being here, for caring about her, for letting us in. I think you let me in first. Maybe we let each other in. They stood at the window together, watching snow fall on the city. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow Lily would wake up excited about presents and cookies and whatever adventures the day would bring. Tomorrow life would continue, messy and complicated and beautiful. But tonight was perfect. Tonight was enough. Victoria's phone rang. For once, she answered. It was Dr. Chen calling with an update on the emergency care center's first month of operations. I thought you'd want to know, Doctor, Chen said. We've treated over 300 patients, and we've gotten feedback from families saying how much the environment helped reduce their anxiety. One woman said it was the first time she'd been in a hospital without having a panic attack. Victoria felt her chest tighten. That's good. That's really good. It's more than good. It's life-changing. Thank you, Ms. Hale, for all of it. After she hung up, Victoria stood at the window for a long moment. Then she turned to Ethan. One woman didn't have a panic attack in the hospital, she said, because the space was designed to be less scary. That's what you built it for. I know, but hearing it's actually working, Victoria's voice broke. My mother would have needed that. If that center had existed 27 years ago, maybe she wouldn't have been so afraid. Maybe she would have come in sooner. Maybe... Hey! Ethan crossed to her, taking her hands. You can't change the past. You can only change the future. And you're doing that. One scared patient at a time. It's not enough. It's exactly enough. It's everything. Victoria leaned into him, letting herself be held, letting herself be vulnerable, letting herself need someone and trust that they wouldn't leave. 3 months ago, this would have terrified her. Now it felt like coming home. The new year came with resolutions and possibilities. Victoria scaled back her work schedule, delegating more to Martin and her team. She started therapy in earnest, working through decades of unprocessed grief. She showed up for Sunday pancakes at Ethan's apartment and brought the good syrup from the fancy grocery store. Lily's Marine Biology Foundation launched in March with a modest budget and huge ambitions. Lily served as youth advisor, which mostly meant sending Victoria 40-slide presentations about various ocean conservation projects. Victoria funded 3 of them. The garage thrived. The emergency care center thrived. Everything Victoria touched seemed to bloom instead of just grow. But more importantly, she was blooming too. In April, on Lily's 10th birthday, they had a party at the aquarium. Victoria rented out the entire dolphin exhibit for 2 hours. 20 kids and their parents, all crowding around the tank while a marine biologist explained dolphin behavior and conservation efforts. Lily was radiant, surrounded by friends, talking about the things she loved, dreaming impossible dreams about saving the world's oceans. This is the best birthday ever, she told Victoria during a quiet moment. Even better than last year when Dad took me to see the whale migration. I'm glad. You know what the best part is? What? You're here. Last year Dad came alone because you guys weren't friends yet. But now you're here and it's perfect. Victoria's throat tightened. I'm glad I'm here too. Good. Because you're family now. You can't get rid of us. I don't want to get rid of you. Promise? Promise. Lily hugged her and ran off to explain dolphin echolocation to her friends. Victoria stood at the tank, watching the dolphins swim in their endless circles, and felt something like peace. Ethan appeared beside her. She's having the time of her life. She deserves it. So do you. Victoria looked at him. What do you mean? I mean you've spent the last 6 months helping everyone else, building things for other people. Maybe it's time you did something just for you. I don't know what that would be. Then figure it out. Ethan smiled. You've got time. No rush, just don't forget that you matter too. That night, alone in her penthouse, Victoria thought about what she wanted. Not what she should want, not what looked good or made sense or fit into a business plan, what she actually wanted. The list was shorter than she expected. To wake up without dread, to have people who knew her and liked her anyway, to build things that helped instead of just impressed, to be brave enough to need people, to stop running from the 7-year-old girl who lost her mother and finally give that girl the home she'd never had. She was already doing most of those things. The realization hit her with surprising force. She was already living the life she wanted. She'd just been too busy surviving to notice. May brought the first anniversary of that night, as they'd started calling it. The night in the rain outside Marchese's. The night everything changed. Victoria went back to the restaurant not to eat, but just to stand outside and remember. It looked different in spring sunlight. Just a building, just a street corner. No drama, no emergency, just another Saturday in the city. But standing there, Victoria could almost see it, could almost feel the rain on her face and the pain in her abdomen, and the terror that had convinced her dying was better than asking for help. You survived, she told her past self quietly. You're still here. And you're finally learning how to actually live. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Movie night at our place tonight. Dad says you have to come because we're watching Finding Nemo and you haven't seen it, and that's basically criminal. Victoria smiled and typed back. I'll be there. Want me to bring snacks? Yes, the good popcorn, and maybe those chocolate things from the fancy store? Deal. She put her phone away and took one last look at the corner where everything had changed. Then she turned and walked away, toward the future, toward the life she'd almost missed, toward the family she'd found in the most unlikely place. That evening, she sat on Ethan's squeaky couch with Lily curled up beside her and Sparkplug on her lap. They watched a movie about fish finding their way home. Lily cried at the sad parts, even though she'd seen it a dozen times. Ethan made popcorn that was slightly burned because he always got distracted. It was ordinary. It was perfect. It was everything. "I'm glad you didn't die," Lily said during the credits, her voice sleepy and content. "Me too," Victoria said, "because then we wouldn't be friends, and that would be really sad." "It would be the saddest thing," Lily yawned. "Love you, Victoria." The words hit Victoria like a physical thing. "Love you," said so casually, so easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I love you too, Lily." "Good. Now we're family for real." She fell asleep like that, curled against Victoria's side. Ethan came back from the kitchen and stopped, taking in the scene. "She's out," he said quietly. "Yeah. I should move her to her room." "Not yet. Just let her stay a minute." So they sat there, the three of them, in a fourth-floor walk-up with broken elevator and squeaky floors. The movie credits rolled. The city hummed outside. Sparkplug purred. And Victoria Hale, who'd spent 30 years convinced she didn't need anyone, held a sleeping child and felt her heart break open in the best possible way. She was home, not in a penthouse 23 floors up, not in a boardroom or a construction site or any of the places she'd built her empire. Here, in this cramped apartment with people who knew her and loved her anyway, with a child who believed in impossible things, with a man who'd refused to let fear win. This was home. This was everything. 6 months later, the Eleanor Hale Emergency Care Center won a national award for innovative design in healthcare. Victoria accepted it with Ethan and Lily beside her, and when they asked her to give a speech, she kept it simple. "My mother died because she was afraid to ask for help. I almost died for the same reason. This center exists because someone was brave enough to help anyway, even when I didn't want it. That's what we should all do for each other. Be brave enough to ask. Be brave enough to answer. Be brave enough to not leave anyone behind." The audience applauded. Lily squeezed her hand, and somewhere, Victoria hoped, her mother was watching and finally at peace. The story could end there. But life doesn't end with awards and resolutions. Life keeps going, messy and complicated and full of small moments that add up to something beautiful. Victoria learned to make pancakes, though they were never as good as Sarah's, according to Lily. She got a cat, a rescue named Admiral who ruled her penthouse with an iron paw. She went to therapy every week and slowly, painfully, learned to let the scared 7-year-old girl inside her finally rest. Ethan's garage became a neighborhood institution. The cat adoption program found homes for 63 cats in its first year. The Marine Biology Foundation funded research that actually made a difference. And every Sunday, without fail, Victoria showed up for pancakes. Sometimes they were good, sometimes they were terrible, but she always showed up. Because that's what family does. They show up. They hold each other to the surface. They refuse to leave anyone behind. One Sunday morning, almost 2 years after that night, Victoria and Ethan stood in the kitchen while Lily slept late for once. They were making pancakes in companionable silence when Ethan spoke. "I'm glad you almost died," he said. Victoria looked at him, shocked. "What?" "Not that you almost died, but that it happened where I could help, that I was there, that we found each other." He flipped a pancake with more skill than he'd had 2 years ago. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah," Victoria said quietly. "It does. I'm glad too." They finished making breakfast. They woke up Lily, who complained loudly about being disturbed before Sunday noon. They ate pancakes that were pretty good this time, actually. They made plans for the day, aquarium maybe, or the park if the weather held. Ordinary plans. Ordinary moments. An ordinary Sunday morning in May. But to Victoria, who'd spent so long running from ordinary, it was extraordinary. It was everything. She looked around the small kitchen at these people who'd become her whole world, at Lily arguing with her dad about whether dolphins or whales were cooler, at Ethan trying to mediate while also trying to eat his pancakes before they got cold, at Sparkplug and Admiral, because of course Admiral had come along, fighting over the sunny spot on the floor. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but real and messy and full of love. She'd built an empire. She'd made billions. She'd proven everyone wrong who'd said a foster kid with nothing would never amount to anything. But this scraped-together family in a fourth-floor walk-up, this was her greatest achievement. This was worth surviving for. This was worth living for. And when Victoria looked back on her life someday, she knew this would be what mattered. Not the buildings or the money or the power, but the choice she'd made on a rain-soaked night to trust a stranger, to let someone help, to stop running long enough to find what she'd been missing all along. Home wasn't a place. It was people. It was showing up. It was being brave enough to need and to be needed. It was pancakes on Sunday morning and bad movies on Friday nights and a 9-year-old who believed she could save the world. It was everything she'd almost missed, everything she'd almost died never knowing. But she was here now, alive, present, part of something bigger than herself. And that, Victoria thought, as she watched Lily demonstrate dolphin jumps over an invisible ocean, that was more than enough. That was everything.